look at technology, how should we be looking at big banks and technology?
Technology is our friend. So it's helping us transform the bank fundamentally. And in fact, we're speaking, I think, as we speak, to our shareholders around what we've done and how we've transformed the bank. We also see technology and technology companies as partners. So some
Not
of our
rivals.
You know, we know that there are big parts of what have been our business historically that will be absorbed into convenience platforms. And by convenience platforms, whether that's Amazon or Facebook or Alibaba or Tencent or something like that, those are platforms that are just very convenient for people to conduct their day-to-day financial affairs. And it'd be very difficult for a bank to compete with that. Now, in some cases, I'd say, let's say in Africa, we are setting up a competing platform to the convenience platforms. And we're working with technology companies and mobile telephony companies and others to create a platform of our own. But for the most part, we're going to be playing on somebody else's platform.
This is a market that over the past few weeks has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
Bloomberg has enhanced search on the terminal to deliver what you need when you need it. Now, you can simply type phrases in everyday English in the command line. Compare financials. Find people. Analyze markets. You can enter phrases or ask questions. What do you want to know today? Ask a question or visit SearchGo to find answers now.
OECD nations need to end coal use by 2030, developing nations need to follow suit by 2040, and we need coalitions of solidarity between countries that still depend heavily on coal and countries that have the financial and technical resources to support transitions, because it is essential that no more coal power plants are built.
I think what we've seen during this period of time is that communicating via video is not a fad, that we are using it in all aspects of our lives, for work, for learning, for communicating, for staying in touch.
We're beyond the survival stage and into the stabilizing phase, and it's just a matter of getting our staffing aligned well with our flight activity and our customer activity. So it's been a really sharp, the good news is there's been a sharp improvement in demand and travel and revenues.
Gary Kelly, Mr. Kelly of Love, Southwest Airlines is well managing the message there. Right now, Kaylee Lines and I would like to manage the message on your next air travel. Over to Helene Becker to say she's senior research analyst at Cowen with Kai von Rumer. It barely defines the ownership of Cowen with airline securities analysis excellence going back decades and decades. Helene Becker, I know you're going to tell me you've never seen it like this before. What will our industry look like in 12 months?
I think it's going to be a lot better than it is now. We're still in that transition phase, which we expected would last. I actually thought it would last 3 to 5 years, and for domestic recovery. Of course, I wasn't counting on the government giving people a lot of money, and I think the stimulus has obviously helped travel. Usually, if you have time, you don't have money, and if you have money, you don't have time. So it's been, over the past, I would say 6 or 9 months, we've seen a huge recovery in domestic air travel. Right. And we expect that to continue. Business travel should come back in 2022, not all the way. Yeah. We're thinking 80-90% of the way, which you know we've talked about. Right. And international next summer should be a pretty good international people will take those trips.
Tell me about the price discrimination, the idea of selling the cheapest seat and then 47 slices up to a full price first class ticket. I look at the ratio of business class to economy, and it's outrageously skewed, obviously because of COVID and all that. Are we going back to the normal price discrimination per seat of pre-pandemic, or is there a new to all this?
No, I think I don't know how to answer the question other than to say that I think people don't like to be squished in the back of the planes, and what the airlines are seeing is more leisure travelers actually buying up to, if not first class, to premium economy or whatever they call those first maybe 5 or 7 rows, to get just a little more leg room. And, you've heard about all the unruly passengers on board. I think part of it is just the squishiness, the wearing of the masks, the whole uncomfort level. I don't think that's going to change. We didn't talk about oil prices yet this morning, but oil prices are up 60% year over year. Right. So at some point, capacity has to come down or airlines have to raise ticket prices. And I think ticket prices are going up.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, Helene, because we heard the likes of Delta warning about that, for example, saying oil prices are going to weigh and we might not actually be profitable in the last quarter of the year. Why is it that airlines can't exercise enough pricing power to offset that cost?
Yeah. So the issue for airlines is they sell 60% of their tickets within 90 days of travel. So generally you enter the first of the month having sold at almost 2/3 of your seats. So the price that you've set, it was using a fuel price that was established 2 or 3 months ago. So you're looking at the forward curve and you're trying to figure out what the price is going to look like when the person takes the trip. We don't do fuel surcharges for domestic trips in the United States, only international. So there's that mismatch. You have to work through that group of tickets, and then within the month you can address it. So it takes a couple of months. We figure the regressions we've done show anywhere from 2 to 4 months. I know Delta said up to 6 months to get price. United said the other day, we will raise ticket prices. They just have to, because I heard your segment with Lizanne, and excuse me, one of the things that she was talking about was wage inflation. Well, the airlines are experiencing too, especially for entry-level jobs and in markets where they're competing with people like Amazon or Facebook or Yahoo or Microsoft. You're seeing huge wage inflation even at the corporate level, not just in entry-level jobs. You're seeing that in retention. So, we're looking at margin pressure over the next 6 or 9 months, and the only thing they can do is raise ticket prices, which will tamp down demand.
Helene, it's like you're reading my mind, because I was going to go to labor next, not so much because of the wage inflation part of the conversation, but just getting people to fly your planes, to be flight attendants within the planes, given a lot of the trouble that Southwest, for example, has had with its vaccine mandate. How do you handicap that kind of issue when you're thinking fundamentally about these airlines?
Yeah, so I'm not going to get into the whole vaccine thing. I mean, United had a lot of success working with their employees and getting the vaccine mandate. Everybody's done. It's just got to be done from a safety perspective, right? That's like the number one thing airlines talk about all the time. We want to be safe. So that's the first thing. Flight attendants, I kind of think that it's not a hard job to fill. Delta had 35,000 applications for 1,500 spots, and United had 20,000 for 2,000. So that's not the problem. Even with
maybe more so pilots.
Yeah, pilots are a problem for sure. Mechanics. Nobody ever talks about the fact that we're not turning out enough mechanics to keep the planes in the air. That's an issue for airlines over the next few years. Pilots, United said they hired 1,000. They were going to hire 10,000 pilots this decade. American and Delta are not far behind. I mean, we've estimated that in order to replace the pilots retiring and to handle the growth they've talked about in, say, 2023 and beyond, we need 35,000 to 40,000 pilots. So that's going to be an amazing career. And there are academies that you can go that will help you financially and that will wash you out if you don't have the skill set early, so you don't wind up going through the process and owing lots of money. really the issue for labor is going to be in the areas of entry level, like airport staffing, the contractors the airlines use it, the catering, wheelchair runners, baggage handling. That's really where you're having a hard time finding people to come back.
Helene, we got to leave it there. I got 18 more questions. We'll do it again soon. Helene Becker,
I'll do it
Cowen,
again.
they're legendary on the airline biz. You know, Kaylee, all of our audiences really care about this stuff. We've all got our anecdotes. I just want to say, in all the travel I've done through this horrific pandemic, I've seen service, Kaylee, like I've never seen. Have there been failures? Yeah. But all in all, it's been stunning how they, when they're in the close proximity with, you know, and every flight has 2 or 3 jerks on it. It's just been amazing what I've observed from the airline people.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been traveling throughout a large part of the pandemic because I started traveling very early on last summer. Once I was told that I could fly with a mask on, I did so. But it's been interesting to see the pickup in travel, Tom. And to your point, service has by and large matched it. But behavior around air travel in general is changing. I feel like we don't see the viral videos on the internet as often of passengers having tantrums on airplanes.
All trying to get back to normal. What we're going to do is through the morning air on radio and television is get you back through a non-normal Friday. There's all sorts of cross currents going on, including that 2-year yield, 0.46%. Coming up, well, the gentleman from Washington in the 12 o'clock hour. Before that, Chairman Powell with our Francine Lacroix. Please stay with us. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Access the financial world on demand. Hear from leading economists, policymakers, and industry experts via live and on-demand webinars, only from Bloomberg. Start exploring to see what's moving the markets. Visit Bloomberg.com/webinars.
BSO Now is your online home for weekly Boston Symphony Orchestra and Boston Pops performances. See new concerts that go behind the scenes, plus acclaimed archival concerts. Visit bso.org/now, where the music plays on. BSO season sponsor, Bank of America.
hard to put your head around any narrative. Let's just be honest. We've had sort of a shift in, are we in some sort of stagflation fears moment? People were talking about that all day yesterday.
And just like that, we are back to all-time highs coming into Friday. From New York City this morning, good morning, good morning. 7-day winning streak, we could add some weight to it. Equity futures this morning, just about flat. The countdown to the open starts right now.
Everything you need to get set for the start of U.S. trading. This is Bloomberg, The Open, with Jonathan Farrow.
From New York, we begin with the big issue. Stock markets back at all-time highs.
The market is clearly climbing the wall of worry.
This idea of rising rates,
not a problem for stocks.
We don't think that there's a lot of pain trade in seeing rates go much higher.
And that's been the story over the last month.
The way you combat that is with record profits.
It's an earnings story. That's been powering the market higher.
Our profits are going to continue to be quite robust.
In terms of the wall of worry.
As we move our way through earnings season.
It's really interesting to see the levels that we are hitting.
Companies are coming through pretty strong.
You're seeing tremendous amount of money continue to come into the financial markets.
All-time highs.
You want to follow what investors are doing more than what they're necessarily saying.
And what they have been doing is buying this equity market. Joining us now to discuss, I'm pleased to say, is Mohammed Al-Arian of Bloomberg Opinion and Queen's College, Cambridge. Mohammed, always fantastic to catch up with you, sir. I wanted to start with your latest piece in Project Syndicate. It reads as follows. Here's the quote. As price increases accelerate, policymakers at leading central banks are slowly starting to move away from the narrative of transitory inflation. But the needed pivot is far from complete and not nearly quick enough, particularly at the US Federal Reserve. Chairman Powell Mohammed speaks later. What would you like to hear from him?
So I know what we will hear from him. He's going to push back against the notion that inflation is not transitory, and he's going to push back against the notion that you cannot separate you cannot separate paper from rate hikes. The market recently, and particularly at the front end of the curve, as you know, John, because you've been talking about it, has been starting to price in not just higher inflation, but also the concern that the Fed will not be able to sequence the taper and rate hikes in the way that the Fed is hoping to.
Mohammed, what do you make of that, what's happening right now? If we look through the yield curve and you look at twos, we're pricing in rate hikes through the belly of the curve. Then you look further out and look at break-evens, we're pricing higher inflation. Can you reconcile that? Pricing in higher rates at the same time as pricing in higher inflation further out. Does that make sense to you?
It does, because the markets are starting to believe, I want to say starting because we're still early in this process, are starting to believe, Jonathan, that the Fed is going to be late to the game. So even though they will have to start hiking, they will be so reluctant to do so that we are likely to go through two distinct monetary policy regimes. First regime is the Fed being late. The second regime is the Fed having to implement that one thing none of us wanted to implement, which is the emergency brake U-turn, which means having to slam on the brakes. And that's why the further out you go in the curve, the more the growth issues dominate the inflation issues. And that's why you've had the massive flattening of the curve.
I want to bring in the Hugh Pill commentary. Before we get there, though, I want to talk about Governor Waller. Mohammed, he has changed the way he's using some of these words. And I just wonder, before you act, you speak differently. And this is what Governor Waller said more recently. The next few months for me are critical. There's much more upside risk than I anticipated that this may continue on. The language is changing. You touched on that in your piece, Mohammed. You say it's not changing quickly enough. I just wonder how you expect it to develop in the coming weeks, the coming months. Because as you've pointed out, transitory for longer, Mohammed, doesn't quite cut it. What are you expecting to change just on the language side? And then we can turn to policy a little bit more.
So I think the language will evolve slowly. But John, we are so behind. Remember, when that transitory narrative took hold of policymakers' cognitive mindset, remember what the outlook was then. It was base effects. Well, we are towards the end of October. The base effects are out. It was initial demand-supply imbalances. Again, that's 6 months later. We are seeing increasing inflationary pressures, not declining. And third, it was about a very strong recovery. Well, most people have taken down their numbers for economic growth, unfortunately. And yet, transitory still has hold of the policymakers, not so the corporate leaders. They've understood. The writing is clear for them. They've got to make really difficult decisions as to what to do with the higher costs. And a lot of them feel confident that to pass it through into higher prices. So you're seeing this incredible disconnect between policymakers, especially at the center in Washington, less so at the regional.
Hello, traders.
Central banks.
How are you today? Hopefully you have a great week. I'm going to place an order to sell short euro. The price I'm looking to sell too close to actual price 116.37.2. If you're looking to sell euro, if you're looking to trade euro, stay with me, place an order to sell at this price, and I'll speak to you later after we will get filled. Okay? I'll speak to you later.
Purchases have come down significantly as a percent of new purchases. That's a concern, John, because it has social implications. So we're starting to see a little bit of demand destruction, but overall demand remains strong. I don't think most companies have an issue with demand. It's the supply side. In fact, some of them, as you know, are saying, well, can't we do a little bit less demand right now and have it later on? Because they simply cannot meet the demand they have.
Mohammed, to speak to that, can we talk about Snapchat just briefly? That stock's down 20%. If we bring up some of the names associated with Snapchat, the likes of Twitter, Facebook, they're getting hit as well. Mohammed, have you ever seen a company turn around and say, we can't get ad dollars because companies don't want the additional demand because they can't meet it? How bizarre is that? In all of your years covering this stuff, how unique is this moment?
It is unique, and it speaks to what I've been talking to you about, John, for a while. The paradigm has shifted. For a long time, we were living in a world of deficient demand. We are no longer living in a world of deficient demand. We're living in a world of deficient supply. And mindsets have to evolve because that is the world we're living in now. Now, companies don't have the choice. They cannot wait. You know, they cannot move from this concept of transitory to persistently transitory, extended transitory, rolling transitory. It's meaningless. It's analytically meaningless, okay? The minute you move away from temporary for a few months, behaviors change. And that is what we are witnessing every day, is behaviors are starting to change. Markets are lagging a little bit this process. Now, it doesn't mean massive sell-offs, because we haven't solved the major problem for investors, where to go. Investors don't know where to go. And they don't know where to go because all the prices have been distorted. And that's why we're seeing crypto attract more investors. And that's why we're seeing people continuously go to the equity market, because there really isn't much of an alternative to protect yourself right here.
We've got all-time highs in the equity market. Mohammed, let's wrap some of this up. There's clearly some tension here between what the Federal Reserve is telling us and what markets are pricing. That's original for this year, because for most of this year, this market has been on board with this transitory theme. Seemingly no longer in this market and seemingly no longer on the south side as well. Bank of America, the latest, the team pointing out, they've just published, they bring forward their first hike to the fourth quarter of 22. They're not alone. Matt Lazzetti of Deutsche Bank joining the likes of Bank of America and Michelle Meyer. What I understand from your standpoint now, Mohammed, the policy options here. What you think they should do, I think, is widely understood right now. I want to understand from your perspective what you think they will do. You've talked about that risk of the U-turn, the sharp, abrupt turn on policy. What do you expect they will do?
So it depends who they are. If you're in the Bank of England, November is live. If you're at the Fed, you're going to start slowly changing your language, but you are going to do it very, very, very slowly. If you're at the ECB, you'll see no need to even change your language at this point. And investors are going to have to navigate not only the assessment of where is policy relative to where it should be, but also what do you do in a world where dispersion among central banks becomes pronounced. So that's the two issues that we're going to have to be discussing, John, because we're getting there. But the Fed in particular, it is still trapped by its narrative talk. It is trapped by it. So it's going to move very slowly away from it.
Mohammed, as you would say, you've got the start of the journey and then you've got the shape of the journey. How steep the trajectory will be. I remember you saying to me years and years ago, what we'll experience from this Fed is the loosest tightening ever. That's exactly what we got from the Federal Reserve 10 years ago, in the last decade at least. Now what we witness, I wonder, is different. Hugh Pill of the Bank of America spoke to the FT, Mohammed. He talked up about that live meeting. What I thought was interesting later in the article, he was asked about whether they would go back to pre-pandemic rates of 75 basis points. And he pushed back against that. He's maintaining and retaining this idea that the rate path will be really, really shallow. Can you help me understand that a little bit better from your perspective, the start point and the subsequent shape of the journey thereafter?
Yeah, and that has to do with the mistiming between monetary and fiscal. It has to do with other growth impulses. And it has to do with the UK realities also in a post-Brexit world. So they sense, and I think correctly, and the Bank of England has been way ahead of others, both in its inflation assessment and in its policy guidance. They sense that they need to tap the brakes now because they don't want to have to slam on the brakes later, which is the risk that the Fed is going to run in a meaningful way. So they're looking just, if we tap the brakes now, we're not going to have to apply as much, pressure on the brakes overall than if we wait and start later. That's the judgment they're making.
Mohammed, before you run, can we talk about something a little bit more serious, important? Liverpool on Sunday against Manchester United. How proud are you of Mohamed Salah?
So I don't think you can see me smile more than I have. I don't know. People should go to YouTube and see his last goal last weekend, where he was surrounded by 5 people and somehow managed to put it in the net. He is just brilliant, and it's wonderful to see him do so much for English football.
I can tell you're prouder of him than some of these friends of yours in central banks around the world at the moment, Mohammed. We'll leave that one there. It's good to catch up with you, as always. Be well, sir. Mohammed Al-Erin, out of Queen's College, Cambridge. Coming up, President Biden continuing the push for his spending package.
We can afford to do this. We can't afford not to do it.
The latest developments down in D.C. up next.
China is a gigantic part of our economic life and will be for a long time, for our lifetimes. But what that does not mean that we should be naive in the way that we look at our critical national infrastructure, the way we look at, you mentioned nuclear power, you mentioned 5G technology. Those are all legitimate concerns that any government, many other governments around the world have. But I want to be, I've said this many times, it's worth repeating, I am no Sinophobe, very far from it. I think.
Do you think you're the last Sinophile in the cabinet?
No, I expect there are lots of. Look, China is a great country and civilization.
What about wind power? Would you let them buy offshore wind power? That's infrastructure.
I think you'd have to
railways.
You'd have to look at you'd have to look at what was you're defining as strategic or critical.
It's really a reminder, isn't it, just how sensitive the markets are to any commentary about trade. We did see some pressure on the yuan, we did see some pressure on the futures. That is now being reversed.
Crypto, you have a world of young people that want their own financial system and their own culture. And it is very powerful, and I'm a big believer in it.
Joe's not a bad guy. I mean, he's a friend. And he's always, at the end of the day, come around and voted for. Where she's not supportive is she says she will not raise a single penny in taxes on the corporate side and or on wealthy people, period. And so that's where it sort of breaks down. But what we're trying to do is reach a point here where I'm able to present to the Senate, they're able to vote on, and the House, a serious piece of legislation. How we get there, we're down to 4 or 5 issues. I do think I'll get a deal.
He thinks he'll get a deal. The President of the United States calling out key lawmakers during a CNN town hall. But House Ways and Means Chairman Richard Neal growing more confident that Senator Sinema is preparing to compromise, saying the following: she's in on renewables, she's in on the issue of the child credit, she's in on family medical leave, and that's the way she ranked them. She said, I agree with you, this has got to pass. Down in D.C., Bloomberg's Anne-Marie. Morning, Anne-Marie.
Good morning, John. Let's get to the taxes. That is where the president really made headlines, saying, though, that the corporate tax rate and that income tax rate, he does not have the votes. And that is really the heart of the matter for the president when it comes to the struggle of bridging this divide in his own party. And he said as much last night. Take a listen.
When you're in the United States Senate and you're president of the United States and you have 50 Democrats, every one is a president.
Everyone is a president, Jonathan. The power each individual senator has. And that is why you see these negotiations so tough, because he needs to be able to make it tolerable to the moderates, but at the same time, not losing those progressives. Now, when it comes to Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema, she spoke to a number of individuals, and what we are hearing is that maybe the tax rate, the corporate tax rate, income tax rate will not raise. So potentially those Trump-era tax rates, Jonathan, that many Democrats said they wanted to roll back, may end up sticking through this administration, but there are other ways they can look about this. Potentially a billionaire's wealth tax, potentially a tax on buybacks. What is clear is where is the love for Kyrsten Sinema? It's renewables, child tax credits, and family medical leave. So potentially enough money to bring her in on those.
Anne-Marie, great work, as always. MH down in D.C., our Washington correspondent. Your equity market, a bit softer this morning, down 6, with negative 0.1%. This came from Bank of America's Ethan Harris, wary of how the spending package will be funded, saying the following: you could wind up with primarily a deficit finance spending bill that's going to be rolled out in an economy near full employment, making the labor market even hotter and creating even more pricing pressure. Joining us now is BlackRock's Jean Bavin and Victoria Green of G Squared. Victoria, to you first. How on earth you come up with an outlook for next year is beyond me. How do you do it?
So as we're looking at next year, I honestly think that it's not going to be as bad as people think. You know, earnings have been pretty decent. And remember, the markets care a little less about politics than I think we actually put weight on it. You know, if you look back at all the events we've had the last 4 years, I don't think you'd think the markets are hitting new highs.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, position opened 116, 37.2. Well done. Stay with me. I'll speak to you later. All of you guys who have a strategy, you know what to do. And don't wait for me until you will see my face on the screen. Start trading. If you're newbie, if you're new person, stay with me and follow my trades. You entered position. I'll let you know when we're going to play stop, so you will not lose any money. And then we will increase our stop as the price will move towards our profit even further. Okay? Stay safe, guys. Well done.
Very unusual, like we've never seen in decades, right? Where inflation is driven by supply shocks, and the risk of confusion around that, both by policymaker and market participants in the public, I think is as high as I've seen in my whole career. So, you know, getting it right will be tricky. That creates some risks at this juncture. And I think a key point, John, is that, you know, when it comes to inflation, a rose is a rose is a rose doesn't really apply. It's not like your garden variety inflation. And as a result, it's not clear that it requires the same kind of, you know, leaning early kind of logic that we've heard from the Bank of England, at least not in the US. And I think that's where there's a bit of a risk over the next few weeks as a result of that.
Look, it's fascinating for me in the cheapest seat in the audience to watch this play out, because there's massive division right now. Victoria, between you, looking for 2 hikes in line with the market. Others completely disagree. Victoria, for this equity market, can you run me through so far how well corporate America is adapting to some of the issues that we talk about every single day?
Yeah, like the markets are going to continue to exist. They have existed. I think one of the things that we think is the most dangerous language is this time is different, right? Every time we hit a rough patch or the wall of worry or all of the different social or economic issues we're facing nowadays, everybody likes to panic now. And you've got the supply chain pressures, you've got economic pressures, you've got political pressures. I mean, you could write an entire book about how terrible the world looks, but stocks will continue to climb this wall of worry. I think the Fed is going to move, but stocks have the ability to continue to go up even in a tapering environment. Look at 2015, you know, stocks were strong in 15, stocks were strong in 16, even with the first initial rate hikes.
This is important, that you can have higher interest rates in an equity market that still performs. And John, I'd go back to pre-financial crisis, 05, 07. We had a ton of tightening and the market carried on rallying. Do you think that's getting a little bit lost here, John? We've acted in the last 10 years as if you need low interest rates for markets to go higher. Japan and Europe have proved that's not sufficient. And in the United States, you can achieve a high equity market even as we price in more interest rate hikes.
Yeah, a couple of points here. First one is I do think that the repricing of liftoff across central banks in the world is overdone. So I don't think we're going to get that. But to your point, you know, we're still talking about extremely muted policy response, even with this repricing, which I don't think is going to happen, but, you know, even still very muted. And I guess the key data point is let's look at real rate. Real rate have been extremely stable, deeply in the negative territories, even as we've seen, you know, some repricing in the front end, even as we've seen the 10-year going now closer to the year's peak. And despite all of that, we're still sitting at -1 negative rate on a 10-year kind of horizon. So that is, to me, like the key point, and in fact, like very supportive of risk asset, at least for now.
The two's right now at about 45 basis points, five's at 122. Yields are coming in a little bit this morning. Earlier on, we were testing the highs of the year on the front end through the belly on a treasury market curve. Just want to wrap things up with you, Victoria, on Disney. I talked to Mohammed about watching a football on Sunday, Liverpool, Manchester United. I'll be watching that on Hulu. You like Disney. I want to understand from your perspective why, A, you think they win the streaming wars, and two, what they do with Hulu.
Yeah, so I do think they're going to end up buying out their stake next year. I think it's worth a lot more than what they're going to pay Comcast for. I really like Disney. First off, it's a very diversified company. You're going to have your reopening trade with parks and hotels and cruises. You know, Delta, at least in the United States, seems to be subsiding. Florida is a very generous state in their regulations right now, so I think you could see continued growth there, and the parks are positive. But Disney Plus is really the shining star. They're still getting into their international markets. It's been a little slow rollout. I know you've seen some ugly noise from some slight downgrades and from analysts recently about, oh, it's going to slow down. But if you look at how Netflix did, and you look at Netflix's trajectory, and then you look at what Disney Plus is doing, as well as their combo package of Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN, and their price point, they're extremely attractive. They still have markets they're going to enter, and then their content, I mean, you cannot, as name brand goes, I know Squid Games was phenomenal and like the most watched thing ever in the United States, but like you can't beat Marvel, you can't beat Star Wars. They have a fantastic slate, and Disney is very, very smart and strategic about how they're going to release it. And their content is actually rated some of the highest of quality of content, but Hulu also gives them a wider variety of content. So I really look at this, and I think it will win the streaming wars. They haven't walked back their 230 to 260 million subscriber goal by 2024. I know all eyes are where they're going to come in this next quarter. There's a lot of angst that it's going to slow down because they pulled subscribers forward in 2020 with the pandemic. But I still think Disney Plus has a great price point. It's $8 versus $15 for HBO Max or Netflix. So, but not.
I refuse to watch Squid Game. I'm just not going there. Victoria, thank you. As always, Victoria Green there and Jean Bavin. I sense you agree with me too. Coming up, the morning calls, and later, supply disruptions taking centre stage this earnings season. That conversation still ahead from New York. This is Bloomberg.
1972 Madison Square Garden eyelet jumpsuit, which is arguably, from what we're finding out, probably one of the most important jumpsuits of Elvis's entire career. So it marked so many milestones, really, for him. It was used for an album cover. It was used when he performed Madison Square Garden, and he was the first performer to ever sell out 4 nights straight in Madison Square Garden. So he really started that whole thing that we see now in pop culture, where when you make it big, you do Madison Square Garden. So we're super honored to have it. I can honestly say that COVID has been unbelievable for internet-based and e-commerce businesses, because we have a captive audience. We have people home that really want something to do and need entertainment, so we do our best to try to give it to them.
A nice little run coming into Friday. 7 days of gains on the S&P this morning, down about 0.1%. No drama. Let's get you some morning calls. First up, JP Morgan upgrading Zoom to overweight, expecting growth to accelerate due to increasing adoption by businesses. Citi upgrading Urban Outfitters to a buy, seeing a favourable risk-reward at current levels. And finally, UBS downgrading Intel to neutral after earnings, seeing limited upside given the company's gross margin targets for the next few years. We're down there by more than 10%. Up next, the supply crunch dividing earnings season into winners and losers. That conversation with Morgan Stanley's Brian Weinstein and Ashok Bhatia of Neuberger Berman. From New York City this morning, good morning, getting you to the weekend. This is Bloomberg.
OECD nations need to end coal use by 2030, developing nations need to follow suit by 2040, and we need coalitions of solidarity between countries that still depend heavily on coal and countries that have the financial and technical resources to support transitions, because it is essential that no more coal power plants are built.
From New York City.
We're in London, in Sydney, in San Francisco.
9 a.m. in Beijing and Shanghai.
Good morning, everyone.
Have a great evening.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak with Lee.
Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Welcome to Daybreak Australia.
This is Bloomberg Technology.
And this is Bloomberg Green.
To recap the headlines.
You do not want to miss this story.
Really good news on the jobless claims front.
How are you thinking about those dynamics?
Mercedes-Benz is on a path towards CO2 neutral mobility. So we have flicked the switch there, and really we're going to step by step electrify everything. And what does that mean? Combustion engines get electrified.
This is a market that
over the past few weeks has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
Bank of America with the stat of this morning, 1,000 rate cuts since Lehman, one every 3 trading days. Get your head around that. Right now, we're not talking about rate cuts, unless you're Turkey. In the equity market, we're down about 6 on the S&P. We're negative 0.1%. There's your opening bounce. Switch on the board and get to the bond market. Futures a bit softer, potentially pulling back from all-time highs. I'll run you through the price action in just a moment on the equity side. Into the bond side of things, yields come in now. 3 basis points to 166.42 after closing north of 170 in yesterday's session. Very close to the highs of the year, 177 at the end of the first quarter. In the FX market, euro dollar 116.37, positive there, 0.1%. Positive on crude too, at 1 percentage point to 83.36. About 20 seconds into the session, we are negative 0.1% on the S&P. Top of the pile, materials up 1/3, financials up 1/3, real estate up 1/3. You get the picture. We're up 0.2% on utilities and up 0.2 on energy. Let's get to the supply side story. This is it right now. The supply side crunch, dividing stocks into winners and losers this earnings season. Snap, I think, with the quote of earnings season so far. Here it is. We expect advertising demand in Q4 to get hit, and this is why. Businesses don't want to spend because they don't have the inventory or operational capacity to support incremental demand. Have you ever heard a statement like that? That's what we got after the close yesterday. It's a very different story with the likes of Mattel, the CEO, speaking with Bloomberg TV. Take a listen.
It's not that we did not have supply chain issues, but we were able to work through them. We anticipated short supply and longer lead times, and factored that into our planning with very specific mitigating actions.
Corporate America is adapting. With more, here's Kelly Lyons. Hey, Kaylee.
Hey, John. Well, that's really what it all comes down to. Who has the ability to navigate these supply side challenges better and who does not? Clearly, Mattel is on the winning side of that spectrum with the fact that they say they can meet the demand. They've been able to do so. The kids are going to get toys under the Christmas tree this holiday season. Obviously, though, Snapchat is feeling supply side issues in a whole different way. And the interesting thing about it, as you alluded to, John, is that this isn't just about companies directly feeling the crimp of their supply chain. It is about the ripple effects and companies not wanting to spend on advertising because they are facing supply chain issues. That is weighing on shares of Snap heavily this morning, down about 22%. It's dragging on the likes of Facebook and Twitter as well. You also have Whirlpool moving to the downside after cutting its full-year outlook again because of supply chain challenges. It's down about 3%. And those two stocks really emblematic of what we've seen broadly this earnings season so far, which is if you miss, you get punished for it, and in a way that you haven't in several years. On average, companies that come in with profits below expectations have underperformed the S&P 500 in the day after their reports by 4.3%. That is the widest margin going all the way back to 2017. So the inability to exercise pricing power or pass costs up on enough in order to retain margin and keep profits padded costs you in terms of an equity performance perspective. And speaking of costs, let's just remind ourselves of the supply side costs and elevated costs that companies are facing. Freight rates for a 40-foot container up 283% over the last year. We're up 200% when it comes to steel, which of course is required to produce automobiles and the like. You've seen energy prices really rising across the board. At the same time, that labor supply has actually stayed a lot lower. That labor force participation rate has stayed stubbornly low. So it's also about labor and the wage cost inflation that factors into that equation. Some companies are faring better with that, but others really fearing that burn, John.
Kaylee, Snap getting burned big time. We're down 21% on Snap. Early days, but they've been getting hammered since they reported yesterday afternoon. Let's bring in the team. Morgan Stanley's Brian Weinstein, Ashok Bhatia of Neuberger Berman. Ashok, can we just begin with the very idea that in corporate America right now, there are companies that don't want to spend on marketing because they don't want the additional demand because they can't meet it. How original is this moment?
Well, it's something I think we haven't heard in a while. And, you know, the big cause of this is COVID and the COVID, pandemic period kind of prompted a big shift in consumers from spending on services to goods. And we're still living with the ramifications of that. So there's persistent higher demand for goods into a world where supply chains were built for a certain lower level of goods demand. And businesses are struggling with where do you get that capacity and the logistics with that from China or the US. And the two big open questions I think a lot of businesses are facing are first, is this demand for goods going to be persistent? Our answer is yes. There's going to be a permanent tailwind or quasi-permanent tailwind for goods. But then second, where do you build or improve supply chains? Do you invest in China? Do you build plants in the US? And businesses are going to be wrestling with these issues for quarters, if not years to come. And it's going to, we think, end up meaning growth over the next 12, 18 months, maybe a little lower, but it's probably going to elongate the growth cycle.
Inflation a little higher and potentially higher interest rates in the mix as well. Bank of America out in the last 20 minutes or so. We raise our inflation outlook on supply side constraints and stronger rents. And here's the bite, the kicker, Brian. We pull forward the Fed's first rate hike. Now, Brian, I wonder if you disagree with that. Because at the start of the year, we were talking about transitory, everyone was on board, the market was on board, and then we pushed back. This market's biting now in a different way, Brian.
Yeah, it's biting now, Jonathan, and you said it before, 1,000 rate cuts, right? So there's this natural desire to believe you're going to unwind those. Listen, I think the psychology of inflation is changing, and it's really important to understand. And the idea that it's transitory, mathematically probably correct, is it will peak next year and come back down. But do people believe inflation is falling or is deflationary forces? I don't think so. Will the Fed react? They've said no, and I would think we'll price in rate hikes, and I think the Fed will push back hard, and I think it's unlikely that we see rate hikes as early as the market believes.
We could do the Fed talk all day, but that's where we're priced right now, Brian. That's where we're priced right now, 45 on twos. Brian, when do you think this rate hike move starts to eat into what's happening with risk assets? Record highs in the equity markets. Is it 50 basis points on twos? Where is it?
Yeah, listen, I think at 50 on twos, you start to attract some money. I really think you need to move out the yield curve, right? The truth is, how many people need 50 basis points on twos? It's better than 0, it's better than 20. But I think in a higher inflationary environment, people like risk assets. I don't think it takes a big bite. If you steepen the yield curve and you believe the Fed will not hike, and you get 10s, into the 2 above 2 range, I can see it starting to take a bite. But honestly, 50 basis points on twos, you'll get some cash to come into fixed income, but I think you need more than that.
Ashok, you're constructive. Underweight IG, but overweight high yield. Another view on high yield is coming under increasing scrutiny for you and the team. Can you walk me through where you're at right now?
So we have been, very favorable on credit markets for a year and a half. And we've, across our fixed income business, made moderate to substantial reductions in credit risk. So we still like credit. We think fundamentally, the fundamentals are there and supportive. But compared to 12 months ago, the macro backdrop is significantly trickier, if not more negative, and valuations are tighter. So our message is you shouldn't own as much credit or spread product as you did 12 or 18 months ago. But this environment for credit is going to be not driven by defaults or bankruptcies or things like that. It's going to be driven by macro considerations that impact all risk assets. And, we think 2022, we're going to see substantially more volatility in the fixed income markets than we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months. And if we see that, one should probably be buyers of that into weakness.
So to put you on the spot, the biggest risk is still rate risk and not credit risk right now, as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, it's rate risk, and I think make 2 quick points. One is there's a lot going on globally in fixed income. It's not just the U.S. I mean, the UK is pricing hikes, New Zealand hikes, Chile. We're seeing weakness in Brazil, Turkey. There's a lot of cross currents in fixed income that we weren't seeing 12 months ago. And second, and this comes back to, I think, a point Brian made, the reason I think risk assets have been relatively stable and good here is this has all been about transferring Fed hikes sooner. It's not been changing the overall amount of Fed hikes or the terminal rate. But our sense is this is probably not a stable equilibrium to see inflation break-evens continuing to rise without changing the terminal rate. And so to answer your question directly, probably the biggest risk for fixed income is we start to move that terminal rate higher in the U.S., but recognize there's things going on outside the U.S. that are making this a trickier environment now than we've seen in the last 12 months.
I think it's tricky for everybody right now. Matt Mish over at UBS seeing a negative year this year for U.S. high grade. Brian, from your standpoint, how rare is it to deliver a negative year for US investment grade at the same time the S&P is up close to 20% year to date?
It's rare, right? It has to be a combination of a low starting point in yields, which we can check that box pretty solidly, a lot of supply, and then just a little bit of rate movement, right? So the spread tightening cannot offset the fact that you have a high duration product with very little yield. And I think this is a risk premium trade, right? If there's this much uncertainty in the US and elsewhere, who wants to buy a 10-year corporate with very little yield? In Europe, in the US, go buy a bank loan, go buy some front-end munis. They're not cheap, but at least they're going to mature. So I think you're going to see that trend continue. We see it in our flows, we see it in our client discussions, and I just don't think even as you said, a 10 or 15 or 20 basis point move higher in yield is enough to offset the uncertainty investors feel. Snap feels it with advertisement. Investors feel it with the coupon versus the risk that they're taking, and they have to speak with moving the assets somewhere else, and we'll continue to see it.
Snap losing a fifth of its market cap. Just like that, click of your fingers, Snap. That was a bit cheesy, wasn't it? Forgive me. Down 19.5%. Brian Whitestate sticking with us alongside Ashok Bhatia of Neuberger Berman. Ashok talking about the uncertainty abroad. We need to get international and talk about EM. We'll do that in just a moment. For your broader market, about 10 minutes into the session, the S&P 500 is positive 0.1%. On course here for an 8th straight day of gains. My producer Jamie says you've got to go all the way back to 2017, the last time we saw something like that. Coming up, Wall Street sounding the alarm on China's slowing recovery.
This is a multi-year crackdown on capital markets and slowdown in growth. No doubt about that. We're going to be talking a lot about China's slowdown for years.
We are going to be talking about it a lot next. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
I'm Eric Schatzker. Join me for a front row conversation with former Goldman Sachs chairman and CEO Lloyd Blankfein.
There are parts of it that I never thought I'd miss, but I do miss.
We discuss why he's not building a second career in Washington.
Among the many reasons I haven't been asked.
Crypto, inflation.
Deflation is a terrible thing. Inflation you could tolerate.
And the future of New York City. Catch the full front row interview with Lloyd Blankfein this weekend on Bloomberg Television.
They know me as Magnus TV in Facebook since I'm streaming Axie Infinity. Axie Infinity is an NFT game where you can earn tokens, and then that tokens can be converted into pesos. I'm playing almost 4 to 5 hours a day. I'm earning, I can say it's really a lot of money. It can help to sustain my family needs and also to sustain my own business that I'm starting. I'm a little bit worried about it because some people who join this Axie Infinity thinking that this is an easy money game. They can earn a lot on this game. This game can sustain their life, and I think that is not the point, or that is not really the game. We are trying now to build a community where other players or my scholars can join this esport, playing Axie Infinity for now, even 5 years, I think.
Countries, Francine, that are the equivalent, that equal 80% of all the emissions. Those 20 countries, above all, have to step up.
This is a medium to long-term story. China's growth adjustment, internal rebalancing away from investment and exports towards the consumer. China right now has kind of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back in terms of their policy impulse. This is a multi-year crackdown on capital markets and slowdown in growth. No doubt about that. We're going to be talking a lot about China's slowdown for years.
Risk and uncertainty, 2 words that get used a lot on programs like this, specifically a lot for China at the moment, and for good reason. One of China's most notorious developers is just about pulling back from the brink of default. Evergrande delivering an 11th hour bond payment, but plenty of work still to be done. Kamek Capital is saying the following: Evergrande's debt pile is massive, and while the bond payment is anecdotally positive, it's still only a tiny portion of what's due over time. Damien Sasser of Bloomberg Intelligence with us now for more. Damien, you said earlier you were taking a long weekend because we're finally getting some positive news out of China. How positive is this?
Well, it is pretty positive, at least in the short term, right? I mean, that coupon payment goes a long way to alleviating a lot of the concerns that dollar creditors have had. But I mean, $300 million in liabilities still owed. The company's still being sued by Centerline, a number of suppliers that they haven't made payments. And obviously they have $7 to $8 billion of debt that's due over the next year and a half, Jonathan. So we're still not out of the woods, far from it. In fact, today, the 3rd largest property issuer, Casa, has a coupon payment due of $36 million. We're still waiting to see whether or not that hits. That could add some angst into the market as well. But certainly the dollar bonds for both Evergrande and to a lesser extent Casa are rallying on this news overnight.
Outside of China, let's talk about EM. Damien, some of the calls for rate hikes from Brazil next week are just huge. North of 100, 125, 150. Yeah. What are you looking for?
Yeah, it's now time to start receiving in the belly of Brazil for sure. I mean, yeah, exactly right. We're looking for, I think consensus has it at 100 basis points, but that certainly could go up, especially on the news that, look, Bolsonaro is going to violate the spending cap ahead of next year's elections. They need to spend money. They're going to damage their fiscal situation that much more. And that's obviously got bondholders worried. And so, yeah, you've seen now the Brazilian real, I think it's at 565, 570. It's exploding to the upside. It was down below 5 as recently as June. So, yeah, you know, Brazil's definitely got its issues ahead of it. And look, we've seen rate hikes across the board. We saw Russia, we saw Hungary this week. Next week, we're going to see probably Colombia as well as Brazil. So, yeah, you know, the tightening continues. And certainly the price action we're seeing here in the U.S. Treasury yield curve, 530s, my goodness, flatter like this. It's definitely a cause for concern.
It's an interesting moment, that's for sure. Damien, thank you, sir. Morgan Stanley looking for 125 basis points of interest rate hikes from Brazil next week. UBS looking for 150. I'll touch on that a little bit more in just a moment. I want to get you some breaking news, some data in America. With that data, here's Kriti Gupta.
Well, good morning, John. You are seeing a little bit of a pickup in the economy, at least when it comes to those PMI data. IHS Market October composite PMI at 57.3 versus 55 prior. Services coming in at 58.2 versus 54.9 prior. And of course, the manufacturing at 59.2 versus 60.7. The big takeaway here, John, is that services number, because this does follow 2 months of disappointing data in August and September. This month, though, services actually doing better than manufacturing. Overall, the big takeaway here is the economy still growing. What's driving it, though? Looks like this month it was services.
I'll take a PMI in the high 50s any day. Kriti, thank you. Thank you very much. Brian Weinstein, Ashok Bali are with us for some final thoughts on EM. Ashok, you're still constructive on EM here, even with everything we're seeing take place at the moment?
Yeah, you know, we still think there's opportunities in the hard currency space, opportunities in the hard currency corporate space. You know, some of these, you know, the developments in Turkey and Brazil and such. You know, the currencies in some of these rates markets are starting to look a little like value, but we're a bit more focused on the hard currency corporate and sovereign side right now.
What about you, Brian?
I tend to agree. I mean, we think there's a trend here where the dollar weakens. It could be good for some select EM currencies, certainly opportunities in the credit space. And as investors look elsewhere for yield, we continue to expect them to look in emerging markets and choose some winners. And then, yeah, opportunities I think will be plenty.
Some of these hikes are just unreal. Ashok, to see a bank come out and say we'll get another 150, UBS looking for another 150 from Brazil after the 100 on 100 we've already had. To see these kind of hikes, 75 basis points from Russia. Can you help me understand the growth profile of some of these countries going into next year with all of that in mind?
Well, I think it's, this is, I think, a risk that is being underappreciated by, say, the broader markets, is the scope and, as you said, the severity of these hikes. And I think, what's happened in a lot of these emerging market countries is they just haven't had the robust recovery that a lot of the Western countries have had. The China slowdown a little bit disproportionately impacting them as well. And now they're confronted with some of the negatives that have come out of the COVID period of rising inflation without some of the positives we've experienced of being able to have strong fiscal transfers without, problems in the currency and inflation. And it's not an easy situation to navigate. I mean, you hike the currency, you hike the rates too much, it's going to lead to a slowdown. And can you arrest the currency weakness? And when we've seen these in the past, they do tend to maybe take a while, but they do tend to filter back into other markets as well. And I think that's a risk to be front and center.
Ashok, do you think we've crossed that threshold already, given the tightening we've already seen?
I think, and we think the next quarter and coming quarters are going to be much more two-way. And so, I think we lean towards the idea, and it's, why some credit risk has come off the table, is that we're going to see some levels to deploy cash at better levels. So I don't think this is, to be clear, this is not a U.S. or Western recession. It's not like some of the big, sharp drawdowns we've seen, financial crisis or these types of things. But we've been living in a world of one-way tightening credit markets, low rates, and rising stock markets, and that is changing.
It's changing quickly, that's for sure. Ashok Bhatia, thank you, sir, as always, alongside Brian Whitestein. Thank you to you both for working through some of these issues. After that 75 basis point hike out of the Central Bank of Russia, dollar ruble coming in another 1% in the ruble's favor. Stronger ruble, dollar ruble now the lowest since June 2020. We've seen some big moves in emerging markets. In this equity market, some muted price action at the headline level. Let's lift the lid and get you some sector price action with our stocks editor, Dave Wilson. Hey, Dave.
Hey, John. Definitely less muted when you go through the 11 main industry groups in the S&P 500. 7 of them are higher at the moment. Healthcare, really little change. But financial stocks leading the way. We had results out of American Express that went over well for its third quarter. On top of that, a couple of banks, SVB Financial and Regions Financial, helping to lift that group. Beyond that, it's really a mix. You see energy doing well, also materials. So, those are your commodity producers. And on the other hand, consumer staples and real estate, some of the more defensive areas. So it's not like there's a theme that really jumps out of today's trading, except for the fact that communication services, where you find the likes of Facebook and Google's owner Alphabet, clearly the weak sister, you might say, among these groups. And it's all tied into what Snap had to say late yesterday. Their outlook really disappointing. Snap shares taking a big hit, down more than 22%. And when you look at a global social media index, it's down more than 3.5% in today's trading. Set a record back in February, really been up and down since then, trying to come back lately. Not today, that's for sure, especially when you see the Alphabet down and Facebook down and Twitter and Pinterest and you name it. The Snap numbers really having a broad effect here.
Hey, Dave, great work as always, buddy. That report from Snap, that statement, just for me so far, the statement of earnings season, phenomenal to hear a company say there are companies out there that don't want the additional demand because they can't meet it. Widely known, I understand that, but just really helps you understand the moment we're in, how unique it is. The S&P 500 negative 0.03%. Jamie points out if we get an 8th straight day of gains, it's the longest winning streak since October 2017. It's 7 into Friday. Can it become 8? This is a flat market right now. Up next is your trading diary from New York City. This is Bloomberg.
happening on Wall Street.
It's the basic law of economics.
The Fed is telling us this is transitory.
Need to catch up?
This is Bloomberg Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston.
We've got the information and insights.
David, you just hit the nail right on the head.
From businesses most influential and instrumental.
And that's the way you run good risk management.
But we need to invest in our systems.
Bloomberg Wall Street Week premieres Friday with replays all weekend on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
You talk about hiring aggressively at the moment. Can you walk me through how challenging that is at the moment? How difficult is it to find the right people?
Well, things have changed. Again, the world has changed under the pandemic, and you all know worldwide, what the challenges with getting people back into the workforce.
25 minutes into the session, can we get an 8th straight day of gains on the S&P 500? It's 7 into Friday, all-time highs. We add just a little bit of weight to that record high, up 0.1% on the S&P. That's the equity market. Here's the bond market. Switch up the board. 2s, 5s and 10s. At the front end, 2s and 5s, just off the highs for the year on 5s. We pull back just a little bit. On 2s, just inching just a little bit higher at 45, 46 basis points. But it's that rate hike dance at the front end into the belly of the curve that gets all the attention, as it should do. We're pulling forward rate hikes. The latest Bank of America, Michelle Meyer, now looking for December next year. Q4 22. Could it be Q3? That's the price action. Let's get you the trading diary. The shape of things as follows. This is the big focus for me. Fed Chair Jay Powell speaking on a panel in about an hour from now with Bloomberg's Francine Lacqua. Do not miss that. Big tech earnings taking center stage next week. Facebook, Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, all set to report. New home sales and consumer confidence coming up on Tuesday, and US GDP figures on Thursday, plus an ECB rate decision. From New York City, thank you for choosing Bloomberg TV. This was the countdown to the open. This is Bloomberg.
Engine number one was able to do on the Exxon fight. It opened a lot of people's eyes to, I guess, the power that smaller investors can have. And I'm curious as to how other people can sort of look at what you did and use that as either a template or maybe just some sort of guide as to how they can sort of approach their relationships with other companies.
We founded the company in engine number one on the idea that we take the data, not ratings and rankings of ESG of the past, but we actually take the environmental, the climate, the social, worker data, and we simply use it to look at the valuation of companies and look at it over a long period of time. And so if you think about it that way, you own these companies. Everybody that owns the company, whether you're a big institutional investor or you're a small retail investor, you own the company. You have a voice, you have a vote every year.
Yeah.
And so our approach is to use the vote and engage with these companies over time.
But that's always been the case. I mean, at least in theory.
Bloomberg has enhanced search on the terminal to deliver what you need when you need it. Now, you can simply type phrases in everyday English in the command line. Compare financials. Find people. Analyze markets. You can enter phrases or ask questions. What do you want to know today? Ask a question or visit SearchGo to find answers now.
Google is saying it has accelerated innovation in the country and it's planning to appeal the FTC's decision. What's your take on this and how do you plan for further scrutinies?
We are going to see what they make and what changes they are actually bring to this market.
Months after Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico is still in peril. Huge swaths of the island are still without power, running water, or access to medical care. Experts estimate that it will take years before these services are restored island-wide. Much of the blame has been placed on FEMA for a slow response in comparison to recent disasters on the mainland. But recovery from a disaster of this complexity and scale has proven more challenging than anyone anticipated. And filling the gaps between an overextended public sector and a suffering populace falls on the private citizens. Robert Anderson is a Puerto Rico resident of 4 years.
The eye of the storm came in south of El Yunque, swept up towards San Juan, and out to Arecibo. Everything on the right-hand side is what we call the dirty side of the storm.
This isn't his first time in a disaster zone. With a military and telecom background, Anderson worked on repairing damaged cell phone towers in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. Some might be tempted to label him a disaster capitalist, seeking lucrative government contracts for his expertise. But as Anderson finds himself in the middle of a humanitarian crisis, he and his associates are developing a variety of pro bono recovery projects that target the island's hardest hit areas.
I see two Puerto Ricos. We're here in San Juan. They have telecommunications restored. They may or may not have power, but basic services are in place. They're able to get food. They're able to buy things. They're surviving. And when you look outside of the San Juan area, you can go 15 minutes from here and find areas that are devastated. I'm working on the devastated side.
Today, he's put together a boots-on-the-ground mission to provide medical care to some of the island's most isolated and vulnerable residents. Steve Berenbaum is one of Anderson's business associates. He offered an extra car and a set of hands.
So we received an initial report from a nurse that was out in the area. We're headed to the northeast region of Utuado for some people that are in need of urgent medical assistance.
Dr. Sally Priester is a physician from San Juan. She filled a van with medical supplies at her own expense and brought along a team of nurses. Google Maps estimated our first destination to be a 90-minute drive. But it didn't account for obstacles like this. Our first stop was the home of an 82-year-old blind Vietnam veteran. His roof was blown off by the storm, and he's been living alone in a back shed for nearly 2 months.
His cane actually got broken in the storm, so he's limited mobility. He has a number of medical ailments. Dr. Priester's having a look at him. We called the VA. They're going to get him set up with what he needs, get him stabilized so he can then be transported either to an evacuation center or off the island. It's when the chain gets broken, when those families that are connected to them leave the island or take off, these guys get left at the end of the road, and it's tough.
FEMA was not officially part of Robert's team, and their arrival caught everyone by surprise. Their job here was to survey and report back to their superiors, and did not come with medical aid of any kind.
People think that FEMA is there to hand out bottles of water. It's not what they do. FEMA has a role to play. They have a very specific role. They bring in ships, they bring in airplanes, they bring in tractor trailers with pallets of things. But they're a big machine, and there's gaps in that thing. And you're seeing one of the gaps here, and we help fill that role. These guys are in a bad situation before, and now they're struggling for real basic things. One of the risks that you run is people going from fear to hopelessness. Those are the folks that we're trying to reach.
And how are they reached? How are they even found?
Word of mouth, mostly.
And what's your role in all this?
Ghost in the machine. I'm lucky enough to be able to communicate with folks in FEMA, the state of Puerto Rico.
For a ghost, Robert makes his presence well known. Not only was he the de facto leader of the mission, now with FEMA in tow, he created his own maps to survey storm damage.
So we're right here.
And delivered them to FEMA HQ free of charge.
I have pretty good reach.
Perhaps that's how he managed to earn himself a coveted FEMA badge without actually working for them. And it's these relationships that allow him to operate more efficiently than an NGO or a government agency.
We're able to resolve problems at a different level.
Our next stop was on a mountaintop, a family of 11 struggling to care for their special needs brother in what was left of their house.
Probably we are the first health team to come and visit this family.
Muy bien, todo muy bien.
The patient has Down syndrome. He is all day in bed. The difficulty with this is the patient cannot be alone. The most important thing is that you need to take care of the chronic disease besides disability, because they have been not going to a doctor, and no doctor has come in here yet.
So we need a refill of this medication.
After maybe 54 days, it's not getting better. And the only way that you can be able to see that is coming to the ground, drive, and see the people and talk to the people.
You can see San Juan from here, but you can't get there. It's like the Emerald City.
On this stop, we caught word that a man living alone at the edge of the jungle was in need of care.
So we decided to take a little detour, come up here and check out and see what's going on. One of the challenges is to find those people that are at the end of these roads that need help.
¿Pero por qué estás solo? ¿Por qué estás por acá? I'm asking about why he's alone right here. He said things of life happens. Yeah, I'm here by myself.
So ¿dónde vive acá? En la parte de...
This is not a job. To do this, you need to have passion for what you can do. You're not going to get paid.
It's said in disaster response and emergency response that the real first responders are your neighbors. You don't need to wait for a lucrative FEMA contract to go out and do good and to help the community.
Leanne, do you feel like you're making a difference?
Lives you touch and people that you can affect. I don't really think about it in those terms.
But why do you do it?
It helps me sleep at night. I think it's as much for the people that are going out to help and do things as it is for the people that you affect.
Whether out of altruism, or the lure of a paid gig, or some mixture of the two, Anderson hopes to stay here to help shape Puerto Rico's future.
Puerto Rico's essentially been a colony for 400 years. It was treated poorly by the Spanish. It was not treated well by the United States when they first got here. Puerto Rico can continue in the way that it's always been, or Puerto Rico can rebuild itself like nothing that's ever been. And we have to do everything we can to make that real. That's the bottom line.
When I met him first online, I found him to be really sweet. I think I was the one who was talking for an hour. He was just listening.
When we met, I saw her. She was beautiful, intelligent, and kind, which was, something that I was looking for.
Anshu and Sumit are one of about 12 million couples that get married in India every year. Unlike their parents' generation, they're not from two close villages, but from two cities on opposite sides of the country. And their love didn't start through community matchmaking, marriage brokers, or classified ads in newspapers, but began online.
So we met through jeevansathi.com. So it's basically an online portal where we have detailed profile of different grooms and brides.
It makes a lot of remote profiles who are located in distant areas more accessible.
Thanks to growing internet and smartphone usage, matrimony websites and apps in India are starting to disrupt the matchmaking industry. More and more people are finding their partners at the click of a mouse. jeevansathi.com, where Anshu and Sumit met, is one of the biggest players. Young Indians looking for love set up profiles including their caste and horoscope, but their criteria for choosing spouses appears to be changing.
We have seen the shift from, traditional caste community conservative parameters to something which is more focused on education, employment.
Anshu and Sumit's marriage was initiated by their parents, but modern Indian couples like them have more input than previous generations.
We looked up to them to agree for the proposal, but it was primarily our decision that we wanted to be with each other.
So what's the emoji you'll use the most to send to each other?
There's a bear, which basically we use for indicating a hug.
Yeah, that's our language basically. Bear icon for a hug.
Time flies when you're in love, and just 1.5 months after they first met online, the couple got engaged. They decided to hold their wedding less than 3 months later. But planning a traditional Hindu wedding on such short notice is no easy task. The massive event usually lasts 3 days, has various ceremonies and celebrations, and involves the entire two families and hundreds of guests. Luckily, there are websites and apps for that.
We searched online, we got in touch with Wedding Brigade, and they helped us finalize the venue. And it makes the search faster and efficient.
Startups like the Wedding Brigade are challenging traditional wedding planners in this $50 billion industry. It provides various services from booking banquet venues to buying wedding gowns. The website makes money by charging commission from vendors.
People don't want to be limited to what is available around them. They want to know the entire range of options available before making a decision. And now it's easy to find almost everything on one portal.
Anshu and Sumit are officially married in a ritual that has gone on for thousands of years, but their love started in a very new way. Technologies might be changing the way couples meet, date, and get married in India, but they're definitely not changing everything.
The technology was only the first level help that we could get to find each other. Everything else was very humanly and emotions and feelings based.
Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren has become a symbol of everything the Republican Party stands against.
Everyone gets a right to basic health care. We need strong oversight of these banks.
A legal scholar and a consumer advocate turned politician, Warren has branded herself as a champion of the working class and made a career out of standing up to big business. While rumors of a 2020 presidency bid remain just that,
I'm not running for president.
Her Senate seat is up for re-election in 2018, and Republicans are already pumping millions into super PACs to defeat her. This is the story of how a law professor and politician came to be seen as the biggest threat to Republican values and the greatest hope for progressive America. Elizabeth Warren was born Elizabeth Ann Herron, the youngest of 3 siblings, on June 22, 1949 in Oklahoma City to middle-class parents. After waiting tables to help her family pay the bills, Warren became a star on the high school debate team. She landed a scholarship to George Washington University at the age of 16, but 2 years later dropped out to marry her high school sweetheart, Jim Warren. By 1980, Warren was a mother of 2, divorced and remarried, had earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Houston, a juris degree from Rutgers, and practicing law in New Jersey. Warren then went on to become an influential law professor, teaching, lecturing, and publishing highly cited work on bankruptcy and commercial law at 7 universities around the country, eventually settling at Harvard Law School. But Warren wasn't always a liberal lion.
Elizabeth Warren used to be a Republican, actually.
That's Stephen Dennis.
I'm a Senate reporter for Bloomberg. Around the time that Elizabeth Warren switched parties, she became a fierce opponent of a Republican drive to make it much harder to file for bankruptcy. She fought that for a decade. It ended up passing anyways.
While her efforts ultimately failed, her warning calls were heard in 2008.
We're in the midst of a serious financial crisis. Our entire economy is in danger, and without immediate action by Congress, America could slip into a financial panic, and a distressing scenario would unfold.
Professor Warren was tapped to help with oversight in the government bailout.
She would excoriate bankers and their bonuses and their practices.
Why should the U.S. taxpayer alone carry city?
She proposed a series of tough regulations, which became the basis for much of the Dodd-Frank financial law that we have today. That sort of catapulted her to national stardom, particularly among the progressive left.
Encouraged by her newfound notoriety, Warren declared her bid for the U.S. Senate on September 14, 2011. During the race, her opponent Scott Brown tried to derail Warren by accusing her of falsely claiming Native American heritage, a controversy that earned her the nickname Pocahontas. Nevertheless, she was victorious and won the Senate seat by a comfortable margin. She used her new tenure to challenge everyone, from banking regulators and Treasury officials to members of Wall Street and Congress.
I'm really concerned that too big to fail has become too big for trial. We need tough new laws to hold corporate executives personally accountable. No one should be above the law.
She called for Wells Fargo CEO John Stump to resign for fraud, introduced the Bank on Student Loans Fairness Act, and reintroduced the 21st Century Glass-Steagall Act. In 2016, after staying silent during the Democratic primary battle, Warren finally endorsed Hillary Clinton and had some harsh words for candidate Trump.
Donald Trump is a loud, nasty, thin-skinned fraud who has never risked anything for anyone, and that is just one of the many reasons he will never be president of the United States.
But she was wrong.
The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
Warren wasted no time resisting Trump's agenda.
Have you ever managed or overseen a $1 trillion loan program?
I have not.
How about a $1 billion loan program?
I have not.
Okay.
In the Donald Trump era, Elizabeth Warren has been playing defense and trying to prevent Donald Trump and his cabinet appointees from rolling back protections that she helped enact.
Warren actually found herself rebuked by Mitch McConnell for reading a letter by Coretta Scott King about Jeff Sessions' record on racism during his confirmation.
She was warned. She was given an explanation. Nevertheless, she persisted.
That moment became something that's on T-shirts, bumper stickers, slogans, and that really galvanized a lot of support for her. It's been very hard for Republicans to get much of anything done this year, and that's at least in part to this resistance movement that Elizabeth Warren has helped champion.
We are here to fight back.
Enough of Elizabeth Warren. Like you,
millions of dollars are being funneled to defeat Warren in the midterm elections in 2018. But it's the rumors of a 2020 presidential bid that has further prompted powerful donors to fund her opposition, often using the same playbook of constant and ruthless ad campaigns that many believe helped Trump win in 2016. It's anyone's guess if she will endure what Hillary could not.
You know, the question for Elizabeth Warren is whether she can go from being a liberal firebrand to somebody who can regularly get 60 votes for initiatives in the Senate and 218 in the House and drive an agenda, and whether she can bring together coalitions for political victories. That's the challenge, and we'll see what happens.
Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, has made some powerful opponents.
He doesn't know me, never met me, doesn't know what I'm all about. I think they're very rude statements, and frankly, tell him I will remember those statements.
My message to Donald Trump and his team is that, your views of Islam are ignorant.
He's the first Muslim mayor of a major Western capital and proud of it. This is how Sadiq Khan went from the son of Pakistani immigrants to a lawyer, lawmaker, and now the mayor of London. Khan's parents emigrated from Pakistan. His father was a bus driver, his mother a stay-at-home seamstress. The 10-strong Khan family squeezed into a 3-bedroom flat in South London. He wanted to be a dentist, but TV in the 1980s convinced him otherwise.
Objection!
LA law with its swagger and ill-fitting suits caught Khan's eye. He graduated in 1991 with a degree in law from North London University and joined a human rights firm. Khan worked a number of high-profile cases, often clashing with London's Metropolitan Police Force. But he had bigger political ambitions.
This is what being a new MP is like, squatting on a bench in the absence of an office, dealing with letters from constituents.
Reports are just coming in of an explosion here in London.
And there's just explosions, and then it was just smoke everywhere.
Everyone's just asking what's happened.
Only 2 months after Khan entered the Commons as a Member of Parliament, London was attacked by Islamist extremists.
That day will stay with me for the rest of my life.
He spoke out against the attacks both as a London MP and as a Muslim.
He has been very clear about his opposition to violence, opposition to terrorism, and has set out to make the case for a more open and peaceful Islam.
That's Thomas Penny, one of Bloomberg's Westminster correspondents.
Here is a man who is a Muslim, and he is standing up and being open and straightforward and being clear that the problem here is not Islam, but it's Islamic extremism.
In 2015, a decade after the attacks, Khan ran for mayor of London, and his faith was back in the headlines. His opponent, Zach Goldsmith, trying to link Khan to radical Islam.
The debate got again personal and nasty. The Goldsmith camp has called Khan extreme and accused him of associating with, quote, those who seek to do our police and capital harm.
It's a pattern of behaviour.
Even the former Prime Minister David Cameron repeated the allegations.
He shared a platform with Sajil Shahid, the man who trained the ringleader of the 7/7 attacks and accused the United States of bringing 9/11 on themselves.
But the smears didn't stick.
Zach Goldsmith ran a very negative campaign that was based on what people knew was a lie.
This election was not without controversy. And I'm so proud that London has today chosen hope over fear and unity over division.
After taking the mayor's office with a comfortable majority, Khan has brought a business-like efficiency to the role, scrapping expensive vanity projects like the Garden Bridge and the new Routemaster buses, which cost £350,000 each. The former lawyer who used to fight the police in court is now praised for his close relationship with them.
I was talking to a very senior police officer in the Metropolitan Police who said there was a sea change when he went into City Hall, and the police were saying how much they welcomed this because they knew where they stood and it was more straightforward to work with. So he works like a lawyer, he works like a government minister.
Khan's kept his faith at the fore. He's an outspoken voice for moderate Muslims across the world.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
Now, by giving the impression that Islam and the West are incompatible, you're playing into the hands of the extremists.
The ongoing spat between Khan and US President Donald Trump escalated when Trump went after Khan, misquoting him on Twitter just hours after the terrorist attacks of June 3rd, 2017. Khan's now one of the most prominent Labour politicians in the UK. In fact, a recent poll of Londoners found Khan was more trusted to keep the country safe from terrorism than the Prime Minister or the Labour leader. His story of going from the son of an immigrant bus driver to the mayor of one of the greatest cities in the world plays well with Londoners. But can he appeal to the rest of the nation? Has Khan got his eye on the top job? And is the UK ready for a Muslim Prime Minister?
What does it take to change the world? A big army? A cure to a pandemic? A revolution? All of these take either a lot of people, thousands of hours, or massive amounts of space. But for Julian Assange, all he needs is one room, an internet connection, and the world will listen. Assange is located here, and more specifically, right here. And from that location, he's posted government secrets, classified documents, and leaked emails from some of the world's most powerful people. And in doing so, has been labeled a hero, a villain, a nihilist, and everything in between. This is how an Australian programmer sequestered in the Ecuadorian embassy in London became one of the most influential and notorious people in the world. Born in 1971 in Townsville, Australia, Assange has always been on the move. Living in over 30 homes by the time he was in his mid-teens, Assange, along with his mother and half-brother, finally settled down in Melbourne. His introduction to hacking started at 16 when he was given a Commodore 64, which he attached to a modem. He attended the University of Melbourne, where he studied programming, physics, and mathematics. He never graduated, but that doesn't mean he didn't get an education. By 1991, Assange hacked into the Pentagon, U.S. Navy, and other branches of the U.S. government. In 1996, he was caught by the Australian Federal Police and charged with over 30 counts of hacking and computer-related crimes. He didn't get any jail time, but he was fined $2,100.
I think the first taste of what would come later was the hacking that he did as a young programmer, and that really sort of foreshadowed a healthy skepticism of the use and abuse of technology by governments.
That's Vernon Silver.
I'm a reporter for Bloomberg's investigations team.
Assange's youth as a hacker laid the foundation for him to start WikiLeaks in 2006. But what is WikiLeaks? It's a website that posts unfiltered, usually classified documents. What separates it from every other media outlet is that they have no editorial hierarchy. With a publication like the New York Times, information comes in, they take that information, package it, then disseminate it for the public to see. WikiLeaks, however, cuts out the middleman.
WikiLeaks gathers information, most of it given to them anonymously. So what they're doing is really very simple. They get the information in one end from who gives it to them and out the other with sometimes minimal interference. Julian Assange is the leader of that, the mastermind, the creator, and really, because he thinks of it as a journalistic enterprise, the editor-in-chief.
But every story starts with a source, and Assange has some unconventional sources.
Julian Assange does not hack as far as we know. He is the recipient of people who are either insiders who give him secret documents or hacked emails from a foreign power.
That's Eli Lake.
I am a columnist for Bloomberg.
And there was no source bigger for Assange than Chelsea Manning, who used to be known as U.S. soldier Bradley Manning. In 2010, Manning provided Assange and WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of leaked government documents. WikiLeaks quietly began releasing the documents in February of 2010, then made big headlines in April by posting what is now known as the collateral murder video.
Come on, fire!
It was a vivid, graphic video. It changed the debate on the Iraq War, and importantly, it put WikiLeaks on the map when they put it online, and they couldn't be ignored at that point.
And those leaks were just the beginning. They went on to post more than 90,000 leaked documents known as the Afghan war logs, 390,000 documents known as the Iraq war logs, and 250,000 private messages between diplomats called cables in what is now known as Cablegate. These leaks were met with very real ethical questions.
The problem with publishing those cables was that a number of confidential sources for U.S. diplomats who faced real danger when their names were exposed.
Then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton drove the point home that
every country, including the United States, must be able to have candid conversations about the people and nations with whom they deal.
Shortly after Cablegate, the Swedish government issued an arrest warrant for Assange on allegations of rape and molestation. He claimed the allegations were fabricated to get him extradited to the United States, a claim the U.S. government denied. Either way, Assange's next move was
to seek refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, which really was the beginning of the new chapter in his life and what we're dealing with now, which is him being stuck in London.
What was supposed to be an office in an embassy is now Assange's self-imposed prison to this very day. But that doesn't mean he's slowed down. Since being trapped at the embassy, WikiLeaks has released files about Guantanamo Bay prisoners, Syrian political figures, and the draft to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And then came the 2016 U.S. election.
Thousands of leaked emails showed Democratic Party officials possibly plotting against Bernie Sanders in his race against Hillary Clinton.
Over the course of 68 days, WikiLeaks released 20,000 confidential Democratic National Committee emails. In terms of the presidential race, if you look right here, when Assange released the first batch of emails, Trump actually takes his first lead against Clinton.
I think we've had enough of the Clintons, in all fairness.
Once WikiLeaks started exposing secrets of the Democratic Party, Julian Assange became a hero to many on the right. Public opinion kind of flip-flopped.
WikiLeaks!
From the emails, we now know Hillary Clinton's campaign manager makes risotto, and also how the DNC squashed Bernie Sanders' campaign. One thing we don't know is who gave Assange the stolen emails in the first place.
Many leading Democrats say they suspect it was the Russians. They released an analysis from a private cybersecurity firm that had said it was the Russians.
But Assange claims
our source is not the Russian government, and it is not a state party.
So this is where we stand today. The public still doesn't know who provided the emails to WikiLeaks. Meanwhile, Assange is still running WikiLeaks and still releasing documents. In March 2017, he started publishing documents from the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence called Vault 7.
The CIA, the agency charged with finding and keeping our top secrets, can't keep its own secrets.
As long as Assange has a connection to the world, no government secret will be too far from exposure.
Julian Assange is still in the embassy. Maybe he'll leave, maybe he won't. Kind of regardless, his work has been done. He's changed the way people think about their governments, about their own secrets, about their own hackability, and really the world has changed because of him.
When it debuted, the 4G wireless we have today allowed people for the first time to hit the road and explore unknown places with only a smartphone for directions. When 5G arrives, it could enable driverless cars to take us there as well. 5G stands for fifth generation mobile networks or wireless systems. It's insanely fast and can accommodate a lot more connected devices. But the reason it's being called revolutionary is because 5G will allow connected devices to speak to each other as well as people.
Right now we're living in a world where really it's a one-way experience.
That's Bloomberg tech reporter Ian King.
The network talks to your phone, you look at your phone and access data, then you send something back to the network. What we're being told about 5G is that really for the first time we're going to see machines communicating with each other over mobile networks in a meaningful way.
5G could end up being 100 times faster than what we have now, with speeds that could reach 20 gigabits per second. In plain English, that means downloading a full-length HD movie in seconds. 5G will also increase total bandwidth, which we will need in order to accommodate the growing Internet of Things. We're talking about the class of devices like internet-connected refrigerators, thermostats, dog collars, but 5G will enable many, many more.
Things like your utility network, factories, where machines are just sat there not connected at all. Suddenly they're all going to be connected. Suddenly we're going to be able to have real-time monitoring. Other things like cars, like utility poles, like your light, the light poles.
But perhaps the biggest advance will be a huge reduction in communication lag time, known as latency. A network of driverless cars will need the speed of 5G to ping each other multiple times per second to avoid collisions. Near instantaneous data transfers could allow doctors to perform surgery remotely with a robotic scalpel. So how will all this work? First, you need to improve network density.
And that's just a fancy word for saying you put more towers out there. What we're being told is that's not actually the case with 5G.
The idea is 5G will not only use the existing mobile spectrum, but also tap into higher frequencies called millimeter waves. Millimeter waves can carry more data, but only travel short distances. This may mean you'll see a lot more of these base stations around town. And the new towers may have as many as 100 antenna ports, compared to about a dozen on 4G cell towers. So when will we get 5G? Getting 5G ready is expected to cost providers $275 billion over 7 years in the US alone. Look for the first 5G service to pop up in big cities sometime in 2019.
People think of Vladimir Putin, they think of capital P, power. And that's exactly the impression he creates. Whether it's physical power, firing different weapons, riding in various James Bond-esque modes of transportation, or tossing hapless opponents in judo. Or political power, ruling his own country with an iron fist, crushing his political opposition, or, most recently, being accused of meddling in foreign elections for his own benefit. This is how Vladimir Putin went from a poor, tough kid in Leningrad to a KGB spy to the very symbol of modern Russia. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin was born in 1952 in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg. His father was a factory foreman and his mother a homemaker. It is widely said that Putin's public-facing tough guy persona can be traced back to him getting into fights when he was younger, which paved the way for him to take up judo. After getting a law degree from Leningrad State University, Putin joined the KGB Foreign Intelligence Service. He spent 16 years in the KGB. When Putin returned to Russia, he began his political career.
He went to work for
Anatoly Sobchak, who was then the mayor of St. Petersburg.
That's Leonid Brzezinski.
I'm a columnist at Bloomberg View.
Putin thrived in Sobchak's administration because
he was sort of considered pretty efficient city official at that time. He was very loyal to Sobchak.
So loyal and efficient that
he was noticed by Yeltsin's close circle.
And those people soon brought Putin over to Moscow to work in Yeltsin's administration, where he quickly climbed the political ladder.
Then, of course, he was promoted to Prime Minister of Russia.
That's Dmitry Trenin.
I am currently director of the Carnegie Moscow Center.
Around this time, Yeltsin and the people around him, the so-called family, decided that Putin would become Yeltsin's successor. And then this happened. The apartment bombings were carried out in 3 Russian cities, killing 293 people and injuring more than 1,000. Putin immediately accused Chechen separatists for the bombings and followed it up with action.
He was credited with having a very successful military campaign against the terrorists.
And it worked.
After that, he became an heir apparent in the eyes of the Russian people.
3 months later, Yeltsin resigned. And on his way out, a famous exchange.
He was getting into the car in the Kremlin, and the last words that he addressed to Putin before getting into his car was, "Take good care of Russia."
So Putin took over as president, and 3 months after that, won his first election. But just because Putin won the presidency, that didn't mean he had all the power. This is Michael McFall.
I was U.S. ambassador from 2012 to 2014. In the 1990s, there was a fire sale of all the things worth owning in Russia, and certain people,
the oligarchs,
did better than others in that fire sale, sometimes called privatization, and those people tended to be well connected with the Yeltsin regime, and they weren't Putin's friends.
But they probably miscalculated, thinking that they could easily find a way to influence him. It became impossible almost from the start.
From that very moment, there was warfare between him and the oligarchs.
That's when Putin gave the oligarchs a choice. Putin's way?
Some of those people from the 90s managed to figure out a new way of dealing with Putin and have survived.
Or prison.
Others could not find common vision, and so they lost their assets.
Khodorkovsky once was Russia's richest person, worth $15 billion, but he ran afoul of President Vladimir Putin and spent a decade in prison.
With domestic power consolidated, Putin focused on restoring Russia's global influence.
Putin is the guy who believes in the expansionist Russian state. Georgia and Ukraine and all the other Soviet republics that split off when the Soviet Union fell apart, he still believes that they're traditional Russian satellites. A lot of his strategy is about keeping them in the orbit. That Yeltsin line, take good care of Russia, that's how he understands it.
And he used annexation and invasion, as well as oil, gas, and trade to keep former Soviet republics in Russia's orbit. In 2008, Putin's 2 terms were up, and he decided to step down as president. Dmitry Medvedev stepped in as president, and Putin went back to prime minister. But really,
Putin never left power. He pretty much continued running the country, and Medvedev was a bit of a figurehead.
There was actually a period of cooperation between Russia and the U.S. that benefited both countries during Medvedev's presidency.
Because Medvedev did not have the same negative attitude towards the West as Putin did.
But when Putin came back to run for a 3rd term, in the lead up to the 2012 election, it was widely believed that both the presidential and parliamentary elections were rigged, and Russians took to the streets. Putin blamed the protests squarely on America, and more specifically, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
He believed that she had sent, and this is his words, a signal to demonstrators.
Still, Putin won by a huge margin and set about crushing the protest movement immediately upon his return to the Kremlin. Over the next few years, Russia's economy tumbled. Putin annexed Crimea, leading to sanctions. The price of oil fell drastically. The ruble hit a new low, and America played down Russia's influence, with Obama calling Russia a regional power. Despite all of that, Putin's approval rating remained sky high, and then an opportunity for payback.
I think I'd get along very well with Vladimir Putin.
In 2016, there was one candidate who called Vladimir Putin very smart.
Trump exhibited tolerance towards Putin's actions annexing Crimea, and similar views on NATO and sanctions.
Secretary Clinton didn't support any of those views.
Even though Putin denies any wrongdoing,
U.S. elections.
Yes.
the U.S. has accused Russia of being behind the leaking of 20,000 Democratic National Committee emails, which many say helped Trump beat Hillary Clinton in the presidential election. Which leaves us here, with the possibility of a President Putin until 2024, positioning Russia to be the world power he always imagined it should be.
Jack Ma is Asia's richest man and most recognizable business tycoon. He's the chairman of Alibaba, China's e-commerce giant and one of the 10 largest companies in the world. Yet he still wants more.
We know where we're going. We want to be the 5th largest economy.
Big words from the man some call Asia's Jeff Bezos. He's confident, he's charismatic, and he's definitely not the average CEO. This is how a poor school teacher went from the classroom to being one of the most influential multi-billionaires in the world. Ma was born in China's southeastern city Hangzhou in 1964. His parents were traditional musician storytellers. As a teenager, he started to learn English from foreign tourists after China opened up in the late 1970s.
And then for 9 years, Jack Ma hung around outside the Hangzhou Hotel, which is now called the Shangri-La. He would get up at 5 a.m. to talk to travelers.
That's Bloomberg technology reporter Lulu Chen.
And I cover China Internet for Bloomberg.
Ma failed China's National University entrance exam twice before being admitted to local teachers' college. He graduated in 1988. He applied for 30 jobs and got rejected, including from the fast food giant KFC.
When KFC came to China, come to us say, 24 people went for the job. 24 23 people accepted. I was the only guy.
Then Ma got a job at a local university and taught English there for about 5 years, earning just $15 a month. On the side, he started a translation company with several friends. During a company trip to the US in 1995, Ma had his first encounter with the internet at a friend's place in Seattle.
I searched the first word, beer. I don't know why, because it's easy to spell, baby. And I see beers from Germany, beers from USA, beers from Japan, but there's no beer from China.
So he searched for the word China instead and still couldn't find anything. And that got him thinking. He wanted to build something that would put China on the world's map.
He started China Pages, a Yellow Pages-like website, but it didn't take off. Then Ma joined a government agency in Beijing to help set up a website. By 1999, the internet stock boom had gripped Wall Street, and back in his Hangzhou apartment, Ma decided to try again. With his wife and a group of friends, Ma raised $80,000 and set up Alibaba, a site that allowed businesses to sell stuff to each other.
人家美国人强就强它的硬件，强就强它的系统基础，这方面确实比你早。但是玩信息玩软的，中国人的脑袋绝不比你们差。我们在座的所有人的脑袋绝不比你们差。
By 2000, Alibaba had raised $25 million from investors, including Goldman Sachs and SoftBank.
He had no business plan and zero revenue, but his eyes was very strong eyes.
In 2003, Alibaba started Taobao, a platform for individual sellers to trade with each other, and publicly declared war against eBay, who had started to make a foray into China.
Jack Ma has this famous saying that Alibaba is a crocodile in the Yangtze River, whereas eBay is a shark in the ocean. And if they fight eBay in the ocean, then they'll lose. But if they fight them in the Yangtze River, then they have a home base advantage.
In 2007, just 1 year after it forced eBay out of China, Alibaba debuted its business-facing division on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. But it delisted 5 years later as its performance sagged. But in 2014, Alibaba raised $25 billion in the world's biggest IPO in New York.
Everybody should have a dream. What if that dream comes true?
After achieving dominance in the business of e-commerce in China, Alibaba has been building an internet empire worth $472 billion, with businesses in cloud computing, online video streaming, movie production, healthcare, sports, retail, and even news media.
Alibaba buying into South China Morning Post really raised eyebrows. This is the largest English newspaper in Hong Kong, and it shows that Jack Ma's ambitions weren't limited to e-commerce. He wanted to influence not just Chinese users, but also overseas users as well.
The US has criticized Alibaba for allowing companies to sell counterfeit and poorly made goods, but in China, it enjoys the favor of China's government. It's part of Ma's company philosophy.
In love with the government, but don't marry with them.
Jack Ma's an extremely fortunate man for jumping on the internet sector so early. Note that this is a person who has no coding skills at all. He's a natural showman and a gifted public speaker and really able to convince others to believe in his vision.
Ma's vision of growing Alibaba to be the world's 5th largest economy faces strong competition at home and abroad. It will require more than just naked ambition and charisma, but Ma is great at getting himself in the right place at the right time. So far, it served him well.
Peter Thiel is a walking contradiction. He got his bachelor's and Juris Doctorate from Stanford, but speaks out about the horrors of higher education, saying college is
as corrupt as the Catholic Church was 500 years ago.
He's a staunch supporter of the free press, yet he bankrolled a lawsuit to bankrupt an independent media company.
But these were not journalists.
And most of all, he's an immigrant libertarian who's the most public supporter of Donald Trump in all of Silicon Valley.
What Trump represents isn't crazy, and it's not going away.
This is the story of how an openly gay, immigrant genius, libertarian billionaire went from tech contrarian to Silicon Valley's biggest Trump supporter. Peter Thiel was born on October 11, 1967 in Frankfurt, West Germany, to Suzanne and Klaus Thiel. Peter's family emigrated to Cleveland, Ohio when he was 1. An Ayn Rand devotee during his youth, Thiel attended Stanford University majoring in philosophy.
His Stanford experience shaped a really big part of who he decided to surround himself with.
That's Lizette Chapman.
And I cover technology and venture capital here at Bloomberg.
He and his Stanford friends made their first big splash in tech with PayPal. After selling to eBay for $1.5 billion, they would become known as the PayPal Mafia for each incredible success after PayPal. For Thiel, that began with an early, modest $500,000 investment in Facebook.
And in VC speak, early means big risk, but also big reward. He turned that initial $500,000 investment into more than $1 billion in cash.
But Thiel was just getting started with Facebook, and he went on to make a whole bunch of wildly successful investments.
From SpaceX to Airbnb to one of the largest, most powerful companies in the United States, if not the world, and of course that's Palantir.
The incredibly controversial secretive data mining startup he founded with his colleagues from PayPal. It connects data silos and then allows non-technical people to search that information for patterns. Data like
financial information, feeds from video cameras, biometric details, passport information, flight manifest.
Palantir doesn't talk much about how they collect this data, who has access to it, or what they do with it. But they have contracts with
the Department of Homeland Security and the CIA and the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission
and several other federal agencies. It's the richest company you've never heard of, valued at $20 billion. But there are plenty of obscenely wealthy people in Silicon Valley. What makes him different...
He's a complex ball of multiple contradictions.
Take college, for example. Even though college was extremely important for Thiel, there's something called the Thiel Fellowship.
In exchange for dropping out and a promise not to pursue college, Thiel would give them $100,000 each.
You basically tell people that if you get a diploma, you're saved. Otherwise you go to hell. You go to Yale or you go to jail.
Also, his relationship with the press.
Here's another contradiction. He's donated to free press initiatives, including the Committee to Protect Journalists.
But he also secretly spent tens of millions of dollars bankrolling a lawsuit filed by Hulk Hogan over the publication of a sex tape and bankrupting the independently run Gawker Media. Why did he do this? Because in 2007, one of Gawker Media's blogs, ValueAg, outed him as gay. And with the lawsuit, he
found an opportunity to get back at them by funding the lawsuit that Hulk Hogan was able to bring then, but he wouldn't have been able to do that without Thiel's money.
And finally, Thiel's biggest contradiction, his endorsement of Donald Trump.
When he was asked about his support for Trump, he was surprised at the outrage that came with it from many of his colleagues in Silicon Valley. He didn't want more of the establishment.
No matter how crazy this election seems, it is less crazy than the condition of our country.
After briefly supporting Carly Fiorina in the primaries, Thiel pivoted to Trump, donating $1.25 million to Trump and his associated super PACs in October 2016. And he didn't just help Trump financially. He gave a full-throated keynote speech supporting Trump at the Republican National Convention.
I'm not a politician, but neither is Donald Trump. He is a builder, and it's time to rebuild America.
And when Trump was finally elected, Thiel was given the reins to an enormous amount of power.
And I want to thank you, man. You have a very special guy.
He was named the transitional advisor. And in that role, he did a lot of interviewing and a lot of vetting to fill hundreds of cabinet positions and different jobs within the administration.
But it turns out Thiel's support isn't unconditional.
Talking to people who spend time with him, I have also heard that he is no longer a great supporter of Trump.
It was reported that Thiel was unhappy with the direction of Trump's presidency. Ever since, he's been mum, making no public appearances, no statements, and staying out of the spotlight altogether. Although there have been suggestions that Trump could tap Thiel for a top intelligence post or ambassadorship, there's no indication he'd accept.
He's described his relationship with politics as schizophrenic. He gets really involved, and then he runs away as fast as possible.
Whether Thiel takes a new position or simply continues as a board director at Facebook and Palantir, at just 50 years old, he's primed to wield some serious influence in technology and politics for decades to come.
Two 2016 was again the hottest year on record, and the previous 17 years have seen our 16 most scorching. Scientists overwhelmingly agree. Global warming is the culprit. And it's just getting started. Ice caps, extreme weather, wildfires, droughts, and the hits keep coming. What are we doing about it? In 2015, the world took its boldest step yet to stem climate change with a historic accord in Paris. But now comes the hard part. Nations must change energy policies and invest huge amounts of money, and they will likely do it without the United States. President Donald Trump announced on June 1st that the U.S. would withdraw from the accord.
The reality is that withdrawing is in America's economic interest and won't matter much to the climate.
Here's the situation. Decades in the making, the Paris Agreement united the U.S., China, and more than 190 other nations in a push to limit fossil fuel pollution. The The UN-sponsored plan secured pledges to cut greenhouse gases, the emissions that trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere, in an effort to avoid the rising seas and other environmental disasters that climate models predict. But even if all pledges are met, the globe is expected to warm by as much as 3.4 degrees Celsius this century, more than the UN target of well below 2 degrees. Meeting the Paris Agreement means that governments will have to offer more incentives for clean energy, scale back support for fossil fuels, make emissions more costly, and reduce deforestation. It's estimated that the deal will require $13.5 trillion of spending through 2030. Here's the argument. Unlike past climate pacts such as the Kyoto Protocol, each country set its own Paris targets and then promised to revisit and improve them. The US was primed to play a lead role in climate change, but Trump's energy independence executive order reverses Obama-era rules and directives put in place to combat climate change, and expands production of coal, the dirtiest fossil fuel. The resulting policies threaten the global fight against climate change. Without the US commitment to emissions reduction, other countries may join it in abandoning the Paris Agreement. This could make it almost impossible and even more expensive down the line to stop climate change. Optimists argue that the shift to a lower carbon future is already underway. Businesses, cities, and US states, such as California, are already investing in wind and solar and taking other steps to make it work.
I've actually been called an environmentalist, if you can believe that.
Okay, traders, let's play stop for euro, and I'm going to play stop at 116.35.2. Okay, 35.2 stop placed. So if you decided, if you sold short a couple of hours ago euro, if you copied my trade, please place stop for this position. It will be stop on your profit because you're already in profit. And whatever happened, you will not lose any money, okay, if it will change direction and if it will go up. Okay, guys, stay safe.
There's an inherent attraction to light and being human. And I think on a very deep psychological level, light is this way in which we experience the energy surrounding us in a very personal manner. My name is Matt Dilling. I'm the founder of Light Bright Neon Studio, and we manufacture, produce, and restore neon works of art and design. origins of the creative content of a lot of the work at Lightbright comes from a variety of sources. Sometimes people come with a napkin sketch. Some people come with an Adobe Illustrator file. And we have a whole design team who then we kind of work together to help create layouts of what it might look like. Scale it up and create a paper template using a pen plotter. And that paper template actually becomes...
Okay, guys. Position closed on euro. As you can see, we have 200 pounds in profit. 1 pip equals 100 pounds. In your case, it's all about how much money you decided to trade when you entered position euro, when you started trading euro a couple of hours ago. Let's keep an eye on other stocks or forex currencies pairs. And I'll speak to you later. I'll let you know if anything will happen on my screen. Okay, guys? Stay safe.
To match the template. One of our chandeliers has over 100 different bends in it. So each one of those bends has to be marked for a heated up bend. We also have to allow the glass to cool between the bends so that the next area can be worked on and heated up in its own unique fashion. It turns into spaghetti, and then we have to make sure that that spaghetti lines back up and cools to the template. We use a blow hose to connect our mouth to the tube, create a volume that's closed, and we can control the pressure in there with our mouth. There's just a variety of challenges that come up inherently in working with glass. Glass can crack due to stress, and sometimes you'll just have a batch that all it wants to do when it gets near a torch is crack. After we've bent various components, we have to go in using the crossfire or the hand torch and actually weld all of those pieces together. The last step on that is then to weld on electrodes onto either end. Each one of those steps is very, very specific. I draw inspiration from so many different experiences. It's hard to come up with one thing that's particular, but one of the ways that I really am able to connect with the creative is to float. Floating is a similar experience to meditation, to psychedelics. Going into a blackened room and laying out in a body of water and salt that's heated to your body temperature, and it allows for all sort of external stimulation to fall away. And your internal world really begins to bubble up and manifest. You really get to experience a different relationship to your mind. I work with neon because I can't not work with it. It's so challenging and so rewarding. And those things are so intertwined that there's no way of separating it out. I've learned so much and continue to learn so much by working with it. I find so much inspiration in working with it, and I just continue to experience new and different things through the medium. It's that close to me at this point. Once the neon tube is completed, we have to hook it up to our manifold for bombarding. The manifold is opened, a vacuum is drawn. We check the tube for leaks with our Tesla coil. We close the tube back off, and we heat it up using a very large and powerful transformer. As the tube is heated up, it releases anything that's not inert inside the tube, and we evacuate that out. We introduce the gas into it, and we seal the tube off, sealing into that tube whatever gas we introduced into it. I think my favorite part of making a neon light is when I see it lit up for the first time. Different gases, when electrified, emit different wavelengths of light. Neon gas is this very bright orange, fiery red color. Argon gas creates a very intense blue, but that light output that is produced can then be expressed in a different wavelength by coating the inside of the tubes with a phosphor coating that takes that one wavelength of light and emits a different wavelength. bring it over to the aging table, where we hook it up to an age-in transformer and allow it to settle, age the gas in that we've introduced to it. There's always a stray particle of something left inside the tube. But that time that the oxide coating can act to scrub whatever is left inside the tube while things are getting settled into place. Once the tubes are aged in, we move on to our process of assembling two halves of the fixture together in a jig, gluing up the center of the fixture to its spindle. Once the adhesive dried, we would connect the wires from the fixture together into a transformer, and we turn on power and it lights up. Part of what we love about what we do here is that we try and put out into the world the kind of things that we'd like to see. I still am surprised when it lights up. I'm still excited when I get to see it illuminated. There's an ineffable quality to it. To me, is this insight into the inner workings of the universe. It literally is. It's a way of looking at what is surrounding us in the cosmos in a new light.
Okay guys, it's time to place stop for our Bitcoin position. As you remember, we sold short Bitcoin at price 62,290. Let's find this price and we will place stop for this position. If something will go wrong,
I want to build another one.
We will close position. It's just right here.
Trend cycles is something I've been thinking about.
And we will place stop on profit 1%.
We want bikes.
It will give us £1,000, and it will be 61,668.
There's always a slight change, and as we build as well, they have the marks of a bike that's built by hand. Most people
I will adjust.
Their dream bicycle.
If price will change direction,
we've worked with a lot.
We will close this position at the price 61,068.
I think a lot of people see a bicycle as two wheels and a frame in the middle. There are a lot of subtle changes and nuances in design which can change the riding characteristics quite dramatically. I'm a really big fan of modernist architecture, and the simplicity of a modernist building is
right here.
hard to achieve. And with some of our bikes,
okay, I will highlight it in yellow color.
Underestimate the time and effort that goes into
you
designing
guys will know what's happened, and I will highlight this in red color because it was short position and it was 62,090.
Growing up, I could never afford with their tubing. We can now put a badge on our bikes.
And it will be red color because it was short position.
As a kid, I just wouldn't.
I was expecting that Bitcoin will go down. Okay, 1%, we're already in profit. So let's see what's going to happen. By the end, I probably will close by the end of the day. If it will go even lower, I will try to calculate this way. Probably I will do 1.5%. 62,290 minus 1%.
Build in steel because I still believe
61,355.
It's been used in
probably any minute. I will try to adjust my stop. We will see what's going to happen in the next 15 minutes.
I just like working.
Okay, guys, stay safe. I'll speak to you later.
This isn't sort of aerospace precision engineering. It's a steel rule and a marker. So when we're cutting the tubes, it's within a mil or two. But what we're trying to do is take the best from bicycle building in the past and add a little bit of modern flair to it. There's various techniques for building bicycles. We do a thing called fillet brazing, where you connect a pipe together. We use a bronze rod and a flame. We heat the tubes up to the same temperature and we fill the joint with bronze. And it gives a very, very sort of fluid, lovely, sort of quite sculptural feel. You've got to practice. You've got to be able to judge material temperatures. You've got to just look at it and you just get a feel for it. It's a stage where your tubes start to look a bit like a bicycle. My father's a jeweler. He'd make sort of very pretty things, which are lovely, but for me, they don't really have any function. What I love about bicycles, you can start on a Monday with a box of tubes. You can be riding it by the weekend, and it can last you for the rest of your life. Outside of the frame and forks, the other most important part is the wheels and tyres. When you build the wheels, you have to lace them, so there's little holes going all the way around the rim. You poke the spoke through. We do build all our wheels by hand here because a machine can't get 30 years worth of wheel building experience. Colour is very, very personal. With any of our bikes, you can have them painted whatever colour you want. We've matched one to a teapot, so we can get that scanned and we can match that or someone's favourite item of clothing. I like to let the bike sit for 4 or 5 days minimum, just so the paint can have time to cure a little bit, and then we assemble it. We get out all the new components, and it's a case of putting them together. Some bikes you can assemble in 3 hours, some will take 3 days. And we've built bikes that cost in the £10,000 plus mark. Some people, they're saving up, and this is their bike, and they're going to own it for the rest of their lives. So we just want to make sure they get the right thing. I think the bike for me was the first time I had some freedom. So as soon as I had one, I was off. A lot of people still get that thrill as when they were a kid blasting down a hill, wind going through their hair. It's fun. Everyone has their favourite jacket or something that just makes them feel good. If you've got a bike that fits well, you actually feel part of it. Building bicycles as a creative outlet is fantastic. It's not something you do because you're going to get a big paycheck at the end of the day. You do it something you have a passion for it.
If you ever saw a wooden surfboard, it was probably hanging in somebody's house or underneath the deck. But kind of in the last 10 or 15 years, wood has made a big comeback. They surf wonderfully. It's beautiful and it feels great to be on one of them. I always had a love for wood and kind of passionate about things that went in the water. I've kind of been around wooden boats most of my life. There's just so much character. The way they're built, the stories that come with them, a lot of that has translated over to why we build surfboards the way we do. When we first started thinking about building surfboards, wood was the natural material we chose. They have a very high strength to weight ratio. Wooden surfboards have the longest history of use in the surf world than any other material. People have been surfing wooden surfboards since kind of the first documented history of people riding waves. The board starts in CAD, where we take a 3D model, break down the shape, and kind of create frames and templates and all the inner parts of the board that we get cut on a CNC machine. We take those frames and we just pop them out, assemble the frame into kind of a skeleton. We go out to our lumber shed, pick a bunch of cedar, and bring them into our mill shop, put glue along the edges, clamp it all together into a panel. Everything's book matched. You have symmetry in the colors and texture of the wood. Cut your outline. Take our assembled frame, gently put it down right on top of the plank. Once that foundation is started, you're basically building up the three-dimensional shape, the outside part of the board, using lots of strips that kind of interlock and fit together. Every piece of wood is going to be different, and it's all going to react differently. There are frustrations with it, but I think that's one of the things that keeps it challenging. You learn to read the kind of what the grain lines are doing and what the color of the wood is telling you. Once those rails are cleaned up, we put our top planks on. It's a little bit like putting a lid on a box. It's like, this is it. Whatever's inside that board is staying inside that board. And by tensioning some rope, you can clamp the two together. It's like a time capsule. What makes our boards unique are they are built right here in York. They're built using material that grows right here in the state of Maine. They're built 100% by hand by local craftspeople and surfers. There's a lot of time that goes into these boards, between 40 and 60 hours start to finish. We wanted to build surfboards that were as hollow as they could be, but still be strong enough to work well. Too light and they don't surf well, but too heavy and they don't surf well. So there's a balance point there, and that's where we try to be. Taking the board off the rocker table once the top has gone on, that is by far...
Okay, traders, let's move Bitcoin to better position. I'm going to move to 61,356 stop. Okay, 61,356. This is our stop. It will give us 1.5% in profit. What it means, money-wise, it means 1,500 pounds, guys. 356. Okay, this is how it works. For people who didn't get yet strategy, you need to get it in order to understand how we trade. All other people, if you got the strategy, you know how it works. Just copy trade, just use your strategy, and just play stop for your profit on other pairs. Okay, the strategy you can get from company.co.uk, from our website, the website written on red colored ticker. Okay, I'll speak to you later, guys.
And that air wants to expand and contract with temperature changes. And that vent has a little piece of Gore-Tex fabric in it, and it allows air to kind of breathe both ways, but it doesn't allow water to get in. Once all that hardware is put in, it goes back into the glassing room. We brush a nice, beautiful, thick coat of epoxy over the whole surface, and that we call a gloss coat. That's supposed to look beautiful and glossy and shiny and flawless. You get to see that board come to life. Whatever the colors in the wood, they really come out. It just makes it look like candy. You just want to touch it and run your hands down it, and it's just kind of the icing on the cake. Once everything is hard, we put it into what we call the oven, get that epoxy to cure, really kind of bake it, and just get it to harden. Put in the fin, screw in the vent, and ship it out. We just love the idea of building something that's sustainable and long-lasting and made by hand. Kind of gives you a deeper connection to the product over something you might buy on a shelf. When a customer gets the board, they feel it. They 100% feel the amount of work and the amount of passion that went into the board. So I'm not really looking at hours and efficiency. We're looking at like doing it right and enjoying it as we go.
Ma Baoli, better known as Gang La, is one of the 4 grand marshals leading New York's Pride Parade this year. But in the country he comes from, being gay is still a social taboo. The CEO of a Beijing-based internet company is on a mission to improve the lives of millions of gay men in China.
对于每一个 LGBT 人群来说，即使这个国家不允许你跟同性爱人结婚，但是你仍然要勇敢地去选择你自己的生活，你仍然应该拥有幸福生活的权利。
Ma's company Blue City runs an app and a website specifically for gay men. Blued is one of the biggest gay social networking apps in the world, with an estimated 30 million registered users. Unlike most other apps, Blued is more than just dating or hookups.
大家可以在我们这个软件里面找他自己的情感，然后可以阅读相关的内容，然后可以进行一些娱乐，比如玩游戏啊，比如看直播啊等等。
Back in 2000, when Ma studied at a police school in northern China, he realized he didn't feel like everyone else.
因为他们都找女朋友，然后谈恋爱，但是我对长得好看的同性的男生，我反而觉得对我更有吸引力。所以那个时候我就到互联网上去找这样的一些资料，然后希望能够告诉我自己我到底是谁。互联网上所有的信息都是负面的，都是错的，就是说同性恋要电击疗法，要被治疗，然后要吃药等等。
After visiting some foreign websites with different attitudes to homosexuality, Ma created his own site for a Chinese audience, encouraging people that
他们也是正常的，他们不用自卑，然后也不用自杀。
Even though attitudes towards homosexuals are slowly changing in China, it's still a social stigma. The virtual world of Blued, where members can be open about their sexuality, is for most a striking contrast to their real lives. This is live streaming, a function added to Blued in late 2015, right as the internet craze was starting to take off in China. Many self-made stars like Jin make decent amounts of money by receiving audiences' virtual currencies and gifts.
我们不是彼此的初恋，初恋这种事儿多不靠谱啊。
For Kyle and Klaus, a couple who have come out, live streaming on Blued means something different.
其实我经常会收到很多粉丝的一些互动的留言，就是类似就是说你们让我们看到了同志情侣之间的一些希望啊，我看到这样的留言我是很欣慰的。
The government's rules for acceptable content online may shift quickly in China, with LGBT material in a grey area. Many companies feel the chill of the recent internet crackdown, but Blue City still runs as usual. Ma has won the Chinese government's trust by helping with HIV prevention among gay men. A third of the company's staff are dedicated to screening pornographic and politically sensitive content.
我不太多的愿意去对抗，我更多的愿意去对话，去改变他们的想法。我觉得这个可能在中国来说是更有效的。
In the past 5 years, Blue City has grown from a team of 7 people to a promising business with about 200.
Okay, traders, let's move our stop for Bitcoin to 61,044. We will go to 61,044. Okay, let me adjust. I'll adjust. It will give us 2% in profit. Okay. All right. No, it's right here. Okay. Okay. Here is our stop. Let's see what's going to happen next and how long. And how far. Maybe it will go even lower, so we will increase our profit. Okay, guys, good day. I'll speak to you later.
This is Rich Chiga. He's a Chinese rapper by way of Indonesia, and he's very popular on the internet. This is Joji. He's a Japanese-Australian singer, and he's also very popular on the internet. Plus, Joji invented the Harlem Shake meme. Let me say that again. This guy, Joji, in the blood bathtub, invented the Harlem Shake meme. But we'll come back to that. So Rich and Joji are both signed to 88 Rising, an entertainment company hoping to build a lasting global brand that will outlive singular moments of virality. They primarily create content combining Asian culture and hip-hop, a formula that apparently pleases the internet gods greatly. They've only been around for 18 months, but they're already putting up major label numbers.
I think that we have an unprecedented collective of talent, a group of predominantly Asian artists, really making waves globally, which from an independent point of view as well.
88's founder, Sean Miyashiro, cut his teeth launching Vice's electronic music channel, Thumb. But quickly, Sean became interested in life beyond dance music.
I knew that after launching a whole content platform that I have kind of the ability and the know-how to do it again, but for what was the question.
So Sean moved to the Bronx to start over and figure it out. He couldn't afford an office space, so he worked out of his car at the top of a grimy parking garage.
Everything kind of started here. If you look around, this is my environment. This is my serenity, really. 88 Rising was built here. Built on the grounds of LA Fitness, residence in a parking garage. I was living in the Bronx. I'm just damn, where the hell do I go? So I just come up here and I just kind of figure things out every single day. Being okay, what the hell is this thing? Coming here was kind of my own kind of private office, basically. To be honest, I would even go to the bathroom here. I would take pisses here, you know what I mean? It was, it's just too far to go back down there. When I need Wi-Fi, I'd spend a good part of the day at Dunkin' Donuts. Hi, how are you? Can I get a chicken snack wrap?
Before 88 Rising officially launched, Sean caught a surprise break in the form of a Twitter friendship with a funny 16-year-old kid from Indonesia named Brian, who taught himself English by watching Rubik's Cube tutorial videos on YouTube. Seriously, that's true.
I thought his Twitter was genius, from the future, just crazy, and just the shit that he was saying, the memes he was making. But I didn't know that he rapped or anything like that. I really didn't, and he came up with that stick 2 weeks later.
12 in the morning, pop shells for a living, and baby gon' smell blood trail every minute road.
Dat Stick was Brian's first ever attempt at making a rap song, and it immediately went viral.
Everything was great about it, but the one thing that I noticed is the song was hard as hell. Just everything about it, man. Just it was menacing, bro.
Soon after the video dropped, Brian signed with 88 Rising.
I'll FaceTime with Rich. Sorry for calling you Rich Chiga on my phone, Rich. Brian, he gets super pissed off that he's saved in my phone as Rich Chiga. He's dude, am I not a human to you?